be so much more entertaining for Fitz if he'd watched any of these. He knows how great this is. How it is an epic entry.
Yeah, you have no idea how impactful that intro music is to everybody else.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah.
It's good to know the things that you don't know.
Our thousands of fans, bro.
Yeah.
Thousands.
All right, so
dozens.
This is a really good friend, a really good friend of mine. Friction and Smoke. This is going to be episode 7, right?
6, 7.
7.
Was Wayne 5?
Yeah. So this would be 7.
Oh, 7. You're right, because we got another one coming up, 6 that
Phil,
I haven't even teased in yet.
Yeah, Phil did one without me.
Did one without me, but it was because it was 2 hot girls, so I wasn't gonna.
Oh yeah, no.
Yeah, it was my wife and her best friend.
Yeah, lock up your daughters.
Yeah,
again.
Exactly.
Yeah. Sure.
You don't invite Ben over for a scenario like that.
Yeah, I've been told that.
Lock up your grandmas.
So, there's a really good friend of mine, Michael Fitzgerald. And I've been asked to go through a couple bullet points. And so I'm going to give them to you exactly how they came into my mind.
And this won't be regretful at all.
Time out. 1 sec. Do you need a towel? Did that beer also?
No, it's all
You're good.
Dude,
all good.
You're going to
got
wipe
a
it on
towel
the
on
kilt?
his face.
That's true.
So here are the bullet points that came into my mind, exactly how they came into my mind. Pedestrian exterminator, the Great Potato, Scottish man skirts, pizza author. It was Pisauthor.
Pisauthor. Yeah, it's a pun.
Scholar of noise.
Nice.
Yeah, all true.
All true.
And now, are these all nicknames, or are they all like almost like things you've earned, like badges that you've earned along, or a little of both?
They each have a very interesting story, and now would be a very bad time to mention my impending. Fuck! I forgot the joke. Let's move on.
So Fitz was going to make a vow of silence at 5:03.
We missed the vow of silence.
5:03.
We teed you up and everything. You just fucking blew it.
Yeah,
it's 5:04, so you can't. You're gonna have to start.
It's too late. I've already broken it. Okay, so half of the things that Ben mentioned were from our childhood.
Yes, and half were from our adult childhood.
And half were from our adult childhood.
Nice. So how you guys have known each other for a long time, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Fitz, I think I have one friend that I know for a fact I've had longer than Fitz, but
I'll kill him.
Yeah, and he and Fitz actually grew up like 3 doors apart from each other.
Okay.
And but I don't keep in contact with him as much as I keep in contact with Fitz, and Fitz never answers my calls, so you can tell like he's a good.
Yeah, no.
My other buddy's a good.
It's a healthy relationship that we have.
Have you always gone by Fitz, or is that like a later in life sort of thing?
No, I've been going by Fitz since I was a kid.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure when that hooked on, but my real name is Michael Fitzgerald, and everyone is named Michael.
Yeah.
I once lived with 2 other Michaels. And no Michael that I know actually goes by Michael.
Yeah.
There's a few Mikes. Mikes are assholes.
Yeah.
That's
true.
Yeah. I think mostly 1-syllable names, just in general, are usually assholes.
Yeah.
Phil.
Yeah.
Ben.
Yeah.
Yep.
Fitz.
Yeah.
Mike.
Yep.
Greg. Fuck you, Greg.
Greg.
You know what you did.
Yeah. You ever met a cool guy named Rod? No.
No.
Actually,
I have.
I met a cool dog named Rod.
So Bo's uncle is named Rod, and that dude is
pretty
like
cool.
Super kind-hearted dude, fire chief, into all these crazy cool things. He's actually a really cool guy.
Yeah, Rod was a bad example because I know a very cool guy named Rod, actually.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
What about Phil? I've never met a cool guy named Phil.
I've never met a cool guy named Phil either.
Yes.
Yeah. I call them gas station names because they're what you would expect to see on the shirt. Of,
Totally.
Yeah. The cursive
Phil,
thing.
And Phil's a great one for that.
Yeah.
Phil, Bob, and Fitz.
Andy. Yeah.
Andy is one. That's a good point.
Andy.
So,
all right.
So yeah, Fitz and I have known each other since. Actually, I always let Fitz tell this story because it's so epic, and he always ends it the exact same way.
Tell one thing. I'm going to adjust one thing, but you won't even notice I'm gone.
Okay.
All right.
So
go ahead and adjust that.
I am going to die telling this story.
This
or
time.
at least as long as I fucking know Ben. So around, it's either summer school,
Third
fourth
grade.
grade going into fifth?
It was going into fourth grade.
Going into fourth?
Because
Okay.
fourth grade was the
Okay.
first year I did public
So,
school.
we're in summer school, and it's recess, and it's raining, as the sky is wont to do.
Can I ask one question? Were you in summer school because you didn't pass the regular year?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted.
So, we'll definitely talk about this more, but I was dyslexic and also just didn't give a shit.
Fair enough.
So, yeah.
And I was like a straight A student without trying at that time.
But you were also in summer school?
Yeah.
Do you do it by choice or what? What were you
Yeah.
doing?
This was the crossroads in Ben's life. If he had not met me, he would have been on the straight and narrow.
I see. Okay.
And I did that to Bo.
Yeah, and you did that to Bo. You passed it on. So it's raining, and all the other kids have like gone out and played, and I was reading and kind of reluctant to do the same. So there were only 2 people left in the classroom, and one of them was Ben, looking sad as fuck because he didn't have an umbrella, right?
And I didn't know anyone.
And he didn't know a fucking soul. So, like, I did what was decent and was like, hey, you want to share an umbrella? And Ben took that as, want to be friends for the rest of our lives? And I haven't gotten rid of him since. He's stuck around.
He's been trying.
Oh, my God.
Really hard. Like he said, I don't answer his calls. I
had
can't
to
make
tell
it
him.
more clear.
I had to tell him you were going to be here. Yeah. so he would finally respond to me.
Yeah, he was like, yeah, you want to hang out with Phil? Yeah. With Phil.
With Phil.
I do want to hang out with Phil. I hope you don't show up.
But in all honesty, one of the best people that I have known in my life, or at least one of the most loyal,
Is my mom.
yeah, is Ben's mother. One of the most kind-hearted people I have ever met would be his Uncle Diggy.
Yeah.
Just real happy to know his family.
Yep.
Yeah.
Our families are intertwined. His dad makes fun of me. My uncle lets him move in. You know.
Yeah,
Is that what it is?
I still cannot believe that Diggy was just like, yeah, I'll take on 2 adult children that I haven't met. 2 white kids, sure.
Yeah.
So when did that happen? When did you move in?
So
together?
I moved to Alaska shortly after high school.
Got it.
Fitz was living in LA. I moved to Alaska, helped my uncle get his house ready, and then in 2006 we moved here. And then I spent the next 2.5 years trying to convince Bo and Fitz to move up. And
Like trying real hard, yeah.
like, yo, Seattle is so cool. Look at all these pictures of cool things.
And I was living in Tahoe at the time. So he finally was like guilted me and was like, it's going to be my birthday. You should come visit. And I did and saw Seattle and was like, fuck yeah, I'll move here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was living with his uncle at the time.
Yep.
And
Don Juan Diego Tenorio.
yes.
Was that the North Seattle house where Sevi was living for a while too?
Yeah, in
Okay.
Shoreline
or whatever?
Yeah, in Mount Lake Terrace.
Mount Lake Terrace. That's right. I've been there once, yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, cool little house, but he, when he met me, he shook my hand and was just like, who is this white boy? Ben was like, this is my friend, and he's like, that's a strong word. And so I liked Diggy immediately. I was just like, you sassy motherfucker, okay. I can get along with you.
And I don't think I went into a background about my uncle before, but my uncle had been paralyzed since the time he was 17. He got in a car accident.
Yeah.
Star athlete was.
He was a Brandon.
He was a badass, and but yeah, and his name was Don Juan Diego Tenorio. Literally, the name of that was the famous Don Juan Diego Tenorio. That's like he had the same name, but
Yeah.
then he was
Wow.
adopted by the Brandons. But so he was just he was a reverend. He was an athlete. He was an overall badass. Just like he was a fiery dude. He was in a wheelchair, but he had classic cars that he would drive. He tried to climb Mount McKinley in a wheelchair.
Right.
Like
The dude was a legitimate badass.
Yeah. Sounds like it.
And had the biggest heart, but also the biggest. He had no problem punishing you.
And so
if you needed it.
He let two of the biggest goofballs live under his roof for reasons.
He treated them like family instantly. Took them in like kids.
Yeah, it was a real act of kindness. It was a real act of kindness.
I think my uncle always wanted kids.
I think so,
but
too.
never had them. And he was
he got it through Bo.
Yeah.
Yeah, he got to see what a 5-year-old looks like through Bo.
Yeah, definitely. And he got to see what a 3-year-old looked like through me.
So
I said don't touch that.
You and Bo, and then you were also living there. So 3 of you guys.
Yep. We're all 21.
With your
22.
poor uncle. Yeah. But it sounds like he's dominant enough to keep you guys keep you guys under control.
There was no
there was no question who was in charge under that fucking roof.
He says do this. I'm okay.
Yeah, you would do whatever he asked immediately.
And not because he was in a wheelchair, because you were afraid of him.
Yeah.
But also loved him.
Yeah.
He commanded that respect. But
so yeah, I've been in Seattle since. Without your uncle, I would not have been able to build the life that I have.
Yeah.
So eternally grateful for that, for sure.
And that's about 11 years now. You guys moved up in 2009.
It's 11 years.
Right?
Yeah, it's 11 years.
Yeah. So 2009. Yep.
Bo and I had a 10-year anniversary. Last year, we were going to do. This isn't what we ended up doing, but we were going to try to make it a stupid couples thing.
Sure.
And just have a really nice dinner and just bicker the whole fucking time. And then just insist it's our anniversary.
Yeah.
Just, will you stop looking at her? Well, we ended up just getting some drinks and buying candy because it was Bo.
Yeah, because it was Bo.
Because he's like a big 5-year-old with a snake tattoo.
Right?
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
And a real snake that looks just like his snake tattoo.
Bo is an amazing human being.
Totally.
He was absolutely a golden retriever in his last life. But real good guy. Love him to death.
He is. He is a very good guy.
He is a good guy. Okay, so you moved up here to just change the scenery, get out of LA.
I was living in South Lake Tahoe at that point.
Or South Lake Tahoe, sorry.
And I had grown up in
North
Tahoe.
Lake Tahoe.
Yeah, in that area. So had the small town fever.
Why the fuck did I say LA? Where did LA?
I did live in LA for
Thank
a time.
God. I was do I have Alzheimer's? What just happened?
So
you're having a stroke.
Apparently. Fuck.
When I
had a moment.
When I moved to Alaska, he was living in LA.
I gotcha. Okay.
And then I came back for a couple months, and he was in South Lake. And then when he was living in South Lake, one time we were so hammered. And we were
Fight Club. Yeah.
Fight Club.
Yeah, let's
start our own Fight Club. And so we hit each other in the head a few times, and then we're like, no. Let's not start our own Fight Club.
Fight Club hurts.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
We're like, but
we finished off a handle of whiskey. It was like, all right, you hit me. And it was like, wait, sucks.
Wasn't that the night we did snuff? We smoked cigars. We chewed.
Yeah. So
and we smoked weed and we drank.
I was older.
We did.
I'm older than Ben, so it was just you can buy everything. All right,
let's just do it.
Well, it was stupid.
So snuff, that's stupid. The shit that you that, right?
Yeah.
Is it brutal?
That.
Is that brutal? That seems like it'd be terrible.
If I never did that, I probably never would have tried cocaine.
Yeah, because if you can put that shit up your nose,
it is pretty brutal. I don't suggest it to fucking anybody. It is a dirty habit.
Yeah.
But we did it, and we tried to start a fight club.
Yeah,
man.
And then we're like, "You're my best friend. I can't hit you." And we both ended up hitting each other. We're like, "This is stupid. Yeah. What are we doing?"
Yeah.
That's all I remember about him living in South Lake. Honestly.
Nice.
Yeah, so that's embarrassing. Moving forward.
So but born and raised in Tahoe.
Yeah, born and raised in Tahoe. I grew up in Kings Beach.
Okay.
The hippies call it Kinky Beach.
Yep.
Do they really? Kings Beach is such a badass name. I always
Oh,
thought. Whenever I heard
it's
it,
fucking
like,
great.
That's like
It's
cool.
fucking
That's a
great.
cool sounding
Well,
name.
they call it Kinky Beach because the Grateful Dead played there for free back in the 70s.
And it was never the same.
Before
after.
it was like really a town. But I grew up in Kings Beach, and Tahoe is it's beautiful, but it's poverty with a view.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Kings
That's a good way of
Beach
putting it.
especially is like a hamlet to the rich. Everybody who works there either works restaurants, the ski lifts, or casinos. I mean, those were really the only like jobs.
And
Yeah.
some construction.
Yeah, some construction, some more like blue collar shit. But nearly everyone who lived there was there to serve the rich, and you're painfully aware when you live in that area of Tahoe of class.
Mm-hmm.
It stares at you everywhere that you look.
Yeah.
So Ben and I both grew up poor. I was the rich kid to Ben, and
Yeah, that'll tell you.
And my mother was a blackjack dealer, right?
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
How many years did she do that?
Oh, she did that most of her adult life. So a quick sidetrack. She was trained in Old Vegas in the 70s when it was mostly mob
Crazy.
run. She was a cocktail waitress and she was left-handed. So the pit boss saw her on camera serving left-handed and basically took her in as a dealer. So at high-stakes tables, if the house starts losing, they'll bring in left-handed dealers to switch out the deck
I had no idea.
to make sure that the house wins. So they taught her how to deal, basically how to cheat, to spot cheating. And she ran high-stakes tables for 10 years and then eventually moved to Tahoe and did blackjack.
Wow.
I didn't know that. It's
There's
awesome.
so many things I learned in just that little
Yeah.
sidetrack.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. And
It's fascinating.
she lived off of tips and was a graveyard shift, so she slept during the day.
Yeah.
And my father would be out during that time. He had a bunch of odd jobs before he became a teacher. Did a program called ROP, Rite of Passage, which was like a second chance for kids who have fucked up. So instead of going to juvie, they would go to this boot camp / high school. So a lot of gangsters, a lot of kids that just like never really had a chance. He couldn't teach anywhere else. He doesn't have the temperament for it because he's an ornery bastard and would just yell and get in trouble.
But it was perfect for that scenario.
But here it was fine, and it was the only way that the kids would respect him. So
God, we need more of that, man. Don't we? Fuck.
So in Tahoe, it's beautiful, but even as a local, you're painfully aware that the town doesn't exist for you. My next door neighbor, that house was always empty because it was a vacation home. Like I said, I was Ben's rich kid. That's because my father owned his home. So the idea of having like a second home to go vacation on is just absolutely absurd.
Yeah.
The town is also like 40% Latino.
It felt more than that. They literally called it Little Mexico.
Yeah, they did call it Little Mexico.
And
So like most of my friends growing up were first generation American.
Yeah.
And just to hammer down on that like classism and racism thing again, there was a single middle school that the two towns up in this area of the lake would integrate into, right? They had separate elementary schools, but we would all go to the same middle school. That was a bit of a culture shock because the other school was all white. And very, very entitled and low-key racist. And so
Yep.
they met a bunch of poor Mexicans and didn't take it well and didn't handle it well. And so
It was weird, bro. It was such a culture shock for us.
So wild.
And so, like, I didn't have a lot of friends during that time because they were assholes. They were rich bigots who were mistreating my poor Mexican friends.
And when we went into middle, so So I went to public school 4th and 5th grade, and then in 5th grade I got in so many fights that they didn't let me go to 6th grade. So I had to homeschool during 6th grade.
So he missed that whole like transition.
And so the transition, so me and Fitz were like best friends, and not only from my point of view, I was his tag along.
Yeah, there's always no, we're not.
Besties forever.
Yeah. And so we were like best friends, and then I ended up not going to school, and so I didn't get to experience a lot of that, and so it was even more weird coming into for me, or probably just as weird, but it felt like
It was already, those cliques were already established
Yeah.
by
Yeah.
the time you came in and didn't have like any kind of context for it.
yeah. And I was like, what is going on?
Ben, were you seen as a Mexican kid or were you seen as a white kid when you first rolled in?
It depended on who we
depended on-
talked
yeah.
to.
Right.
Because
It's like today.
Ben's pretty fair skinned.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah.
It's just like how it is today. White people always are like, oh, you're white, and then everybody else is like, there's no way you're white. You're like native or Mexican, or
Yeah.
or Samoan.
Yeah.
Okay.
And any ethnic person sees Ben and they're like, what are you hiding?
Yeah.
Um,
But like most like white males are like, no, you're white, bro.
You're white, yeah.
You're white. I'm like,
So, yeah, Tahoe has this very weird, clear divide in it. But on top of that, it is a majestic place.
yeah.
I have a deep love for the outdoors that I don't think I would have had if I had not grown up in Tahoe. Like, you are 6,000 feet up on a mountain near a lake that could cover California in water.
Yeah.
It's a ridiculously, absurdly beautiful thing. So it has this weird contrast of being a place that you genuinely want to be, but having deep societal divides. And so, like, much of the lake is accessible on any shore except for on the east shore, and that is where all of the rich folk live.
Yep.
And you can't even. It's the only part of the lake where the road. You don't have an actual like view of the lake because they've walled it off, etc. That bigot Trump has a house out there. Leonard Nimoy used to live out there.
Will Smith, Robin Williams.
Yeah, Robin Williams.
okay.
Robin Williams actually played video games with my mom at some point.
Nice.
So he would go to the casino, and on her break, they would go play like light guns. I forget what the buck hunter. Yeah, they'd go.
Buck hunter.
They'd go play buck hunter, and she grew up in Wyoming, and was a fucking straight shooter to begin with. So that's weird. Yeah, I also met Leonard Nimoy when I was like 14. I sold him popcorn.
When you worked at the movie theater.
Yeah, and I've always been a huge Trekkie, so that was like
That's pretty great.
that was a big moment. That was cool.
Didn't he sign a Reese's Pieces thing? For
No,
you?
he littered a Kit Kat wrapper,
Oh, it was a Kit Kat.
which I kept because I was 14 and
And
crazy.
he was like, Fitz was always what?
Live long and prosper. Yeah, yeah.
no, and
Is
he
it
taught
this-
me.
this one,
I
right?
say peace and long life. Right?
Yeah.
He taught me the Trek ways.
And so, but I do have an autograph from him because a family friend who was a waiter saw him. He was a sommelier. Was just like, sign this menu for like my dorky kid's friend. Yeah, don't have much else to say about Tahoe except most of my field trips growing up were to the Donner Party.
Yeah.
Which so this is only weird in retrospect. I thought this was perfectly normal. Talking to adults about, oh, what field trips did you go to? And be like, yeah, we went to a chocolate factory, or like maybe we went to a monument or whatever. I swear, like half of every field trip was to the Donner Party.
Yeah. And we'd
And-
learn about cannibalism.
And you'd learn about child cannibalism and how desperate that situation was. And without fail, there'd be a Mark Twain impersonator, who, by the way, has nothing to do with the fucking Donner Party.
yeah.
And he'd
I
just
actually-
be like, I'm Samuel Clemens, also known as Mark Twain, every time. And I don't know if he was invited
Or if he just showed up.
or if he was just a part of the historic society and he's like, I know what to do around children. It was weird.
I just need a better visual of how this field trip unfolds. Just
Okay,
like
so the
yeah.
Donner Party, for those who are not familiar, were a group of settlers heading west.
Got
If you've ever played the Oregon Trail, you know
Yes.
exactly what this is about. And they made a series of unfortunate decisions. And one of those decisions was to cut through the Sierra Nevadas during the fall to try to save time. And they were hoping that they would get to California.
Oh, okay.
And the biggest snowfall that has ever happened that year. We're talking 12 feet of snow. They've cut down branches of the pine trees around this area to show how high the snow level was. It was so high that they could not dig down to the earth. And they were stuck there for the entire winter. And they ran out of food. And as desperation mounted, they started boiling shoes and eventually ate their dead. Starting with children.
More tender
Well, yeah,
or something.
yeah, sure. Easier to boil. I'm sure they're smaller. And so our field trip, we would be brought to this area and it'd be shown like, here is an actual journal of the child who was eaten, who was our age.
Like,
Right? And this was appropriate because it's history. And the first time you go, you have this sense of like awe and like you're kind of haunted by it and you're also just really bored.
and mind you, we went on this field trip our entire elementary school, I think, middle school.
Yeah, it's just like
High
all
school.
of the
Fucking
all of
weird.
the time
It's
because
so weird.
it was
It was that or like gold panning.
So weird.
gold panning in the American River.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'd go to the American River and go gold panning.
That's funny.
Yeah,
So the Donner Party, which I don't know much about, ended up they basically had to go cannibal by just to survive.
Necessity,
By
just
necessity.
to survive, and there was only a handful of them.
In the end,
In the end, yeah, and there were a couple search parties. I think the first one failed, and I don't think they were found until late spring, which in Tahoe just means less winter.
right?
yeah. I mean, sometimes you get snow in June.
Yeah.
Yeah, at any rate, history is terrifying. So learned that at an early age.
I had no idea. Now I got to look at the Donner Party.
Yeah, no, it's
And
it's
so
a
we'd
treat.
go to this museum and this monument all the time, and they have all these like pictures and all these
These
trinkets
artifacts,
and
yeah.
artifacts from these people that ate each other.
Journals. Here is
And you're like, what?
one of the shoes that someone tried to eat. Cool.
And then they
Also,
ate him.
on your left is an adult man dressed like Mark Twain.
Yeah. So the guy who did those, his son, Mac, was in. He took Tong Sudo when I was taking Tong Sudo as a child, and so that guy,
You knew Mark Twain,
I did,
and you didn't tell me.
and his license plate.
You don't
said-
know how much this guy has affected my
Listen,
adult
Fitz,
life.
this is the kind of shit that comes
Like,
out on this thing.
God
Yeah.
damn
That's
it!
what happens.
All of the time, I have Samuel Clemens stuck in my head every time I see him.
Well, the funniest thing about this guy is
Was he friends with the Tesla impersonator?
No, I don't know, but he was on that group of. Ironically, he was on that group of elite. So these people, we used to call it Income Village.
Oh, yeah,
because of
yeah.
how shitty they would
It
treat
was
us.
really called Incline Village, but that's the East Shore.
and that's where Trump and everybody else have their houses on the lakeshore. And so there would be when we were in Tong Sudo. So Robert Ram, remember Robert Ram?
Yeah,
He was the
the
one.
audience does too. Go on with
Yeah,
this
Robert Ram.
totally relatable story.
Well, It doesn't matter, whatever. But he was in Tong Sudo, so that's why I tried it out. And it was actually taught to us by a guy named Robert Palmer,
What is happening?
right? Who was a Navy SEAL.
This is only adding more befuddlement to my history with Mark Twain.
Yeah, but so there was a clear divide
His name was
in the class. I don't know.
Robert Palmer.
No.
His name was Robert Palmer.
His name was Robert Palmer.
And so that was a weird thing. But Mark Twain impersonator, his son took Tong Sudo with us. And
Wild.
He was his son was kind of a bitch. I mean, he treated us like the rest of them did. So, you know. But
Huh.
We don't have a chip on our shoulder at all
No.
about
Not at
rich
all.
people. No. It's we've clearly been integrated well into society, which is why I wear pants.
So that was our
That was Tahoe. I know it's really helpful to get I've only been down there for vacation, so I was
Sure.
on the outskirts.
And
I
you've likely
experienced-
been to the south side.
Yeah,
too.
and I experienced like the week of majestic beauty and good service and all that stuff. And little do I know that there's all this undercurrent of classism and all that shit going on there, which is
Did you know that
makes perfect sense.
Kings Beach actually had one of the worst crime rates in all of northern in like all of northern California at one time? So their computer system was so far out of date that people would sex offenders
Mm-hmm.
and people who were trying to be
would move out to that area.
they would move out to that area
Just because the technology was so bad.
so nobody knew, and they would be,
Also, it borders. It's like 2 or 3 miles away from Nevada,
yeah.
so no one's really watching that area to begin
Yeah.
with.
Got it.
And so there's a lot of awful. And I mean, Cal Neva didn't Frank Sinatra and all them have like the Rat Pack had that, wasn't it the Cal Neva?
Yeah. So real quick history. The Cal Neva is one of the oldest casinos in North America. My mother worked there at some point, and so did my father.
So did my mom.
Yeah. And they have caves there that bootleggers used to keep kegs.
Okay.
That is like right up on the water. And Frank Sinatra owed a bunch of debt to the casinos and was forced to play there for a number of years.
Yeah.
Forced to headline.
Oh,
to
I
pay
had
it off.
no idea.
So not only do you have this current classist structure, you also have like a history of shenanigans and crime.
Yeah. And it's like 30 minutes from Reno, so it is really. The joke used to be like, Reno's so close to hell you can see sparks.
Which I know everyone who lives in Sparks disagrees. It's Reno. You're still in Reno.
You're still
it's
in
the
Reno.
same town.
It's still,
Reno is where cocktail waitresses go to die.
Yep. And I mean, there's whorehouses, strip clubs, which might as well be whorehouses. And
Yeah.
It has had like a bit of a creative uptick
It has.
in the last few years because it has been cheaper to live. So
And because of the Tesla Gigafactory.
yeah, it's sort of like
Okay.
what Portland was 20 years ago.
Yeah. What Seattle was maybe 30 years
Yeah,
ago or something.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's some Tahoe, some more Tahoe.
Got it.
But yeah, so there was a bunch of like even my cousin Sonny, he just, man, I won't go into
Yeah.
this crazy story, but yeah, the Sepulveda inside of my
But
family.
I don't want people to walk away thinking that Tahoe is bad, because it is a beautiful place and there are a lot of really awesome people who live
It
there.
is super beautiful, and I've
It
met
is
a bunch
really
of cool
beautiful,
cats from
and
Tahoe.
also
You guys included. Well,
the conservation efforts out there are pretty epic. People really, really care about the environment there.
yeah.
And it's hard not to when you're in the middle of the Sierra Nevadas, when you have a majestic lake next to you, and where you see a black bear like every other day.
Yeah.
I've almost hit a black bear on a bicycle once. So that was fun.
so what
was
kind
a
of bike was he
regular
riding?
I was really late at night. It was super dark out. I'm riding home from a pizza job that I had, and I think I see a boulder dead ahead of me.
Oh shit.
And so I like swerve a little to miss this boulder, and the boulder growls and stands up. I startled a bear, and I went as fast as I could, knowing full well that like the bear could keep up with me even on a bicycle. I was very lucky he ran the other way. Just startled him, like, what the fuck was that? Yeah. Have had many close encounters with bears.
In nature.
The first time I took my ex out to Tahoe, we went down to the lake. We rolled, shared some wine, watched the stars. I'm like, I'm gonna show you a bear tonight. And she's like, yeah, okay, whatever. I'm like, no, really, we'll find a bear. I know exactly where they will be. And
So when you say you rolled,
Molly.
okay,
Molly.
Yeah, drugs.
drugs.
Yeah.
Okay.
You were doing drugs.
Yes, doing drugs.
So you weren't doing jiu-jitsu.
I was a baddie doing the bad things.
Yeah.
So, speaking of close encounters with nature, I had this job.
Those coasters are worthless. Sorry, they stick to anything that gets moisture on them, and they're just there to piss you off at this point. You don't even need to use them.
Okay.
And there is a nicotine toothpick if you like one of those. Those are always up for grabs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Groovy.
Yeah.
I'm
And
good.
can
thank
you hand me one of those brown pillows?
So,
And then
speaking
we'll let
of close encounters with nature, I think it was my senior year of high school, or right before I moved to Alaska. I had this paper out,
Oh God.
and every now and then I would talk my friends into going on the paper route with me.
Please yield this one. Okay. So Ben is not telling this correctly in that he invited people over on this route. He'd be like, "Hey, let's stay the night and like drink or whatever, have fun." And then he'd be like, "Oh yeah, I need to be up at 3 a.m, and you're coming with me because I need someone to keep me awake." And so we'd do this paper route, and there'd be like 4 feet of snow on the ground.
Oh my
And
God.
the windows are all down, and he would call out a paper while he was driving, and I would have to like pick it up and throw it as hard as I fucking could at whatever house, and we just keep going. And almost got stuck in the snow a few times, but that's par for the course out there. So dawn breaks, and you have a sangria stain across the sky for the sunrise that is being reflected by the white snow beneath. And out in the distance is a single deer. And it is honestly one of the most serene, picturesque things I think I've ever seen. And
Yeah,
Ben,
huge buck,
yeah, and
full rack.
Ben rolls down the window and he just says, "New York Times." So I hand him a New York Times, and with all of his might, he tosses this paper right at the buck's ass.
Just pelt it.
Because, like I said, the conservation effort down there is really good. We really care about our wildlife, and
So you hit the buck with
Yeah.
with the New York
With the
Times.
New York
with the
Times.
New York Times. Yeah,
Did he just take off or what?
yeah, he just ran
Yeah.
like there was no tomorrow.
Another time when around that same spot, that trailer park we went in before that, there was this brown bear, and bam, hit it in the face and took off. It was chasing me. I was like, oh shit.
This is why I don't answer Ben's calls. Primarily.
Phil just has this look of disgust.
No,
on
I'm
his
just I hated paper routes, and I wasn't good because I've never been a morning person, so I can only
Oh, no,
imagine.
same.
Yeah, that's just not a job for me.
Yeah. So I was like going to school. I worked at the snowboard shop. I had a paper out. I was paying Bo's mom rent. So there's this list of things that like I was working all these jobs to
Right.
try and get by, and so I would sucker my friends into coming along on my
Coming on the
paper,
paper
route.
route.
Yeah.
How old were you? You were
18
18, yeah.
or 17.
I was 18.
You were
had
18,
to have
I was
been 17.
17,
Because, yeah, you had just moved out. And,
Yeah, I was 17.
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
No
So
idea.
Yeah, that was before my mom died. So, had to
And-
have been 18.
man, so Bo and Fitz, they're both named Michael. Both their moms are named Robin. Both their moms are were just amazing women, and
I didn't hear from Ben for like 6 months,
yeah.
and I come to find out that he has a new best friend named Michael. And hey, look, it's Robin. He just got confused. He's like, oh, yeah, I belong here. This is.
It's Michael and Robin.
Wait.
This is my home.
Something is different.
Oh, another bullet point I was gonna say was what was it?
We're not getting to any of those, by the way.
I know. So me and Fitz used to walk around the town of Kings Beach all the time, and we had this because Fitz has always been good with computers and into stuff like that, and he's always been
Nerd things
for sure. But we wanted to make a video game, and we wanted, because everybody be like 500 points, old man, or whatever, when you're driving. We wanted to make that into an actual video game.
Yeah,
And
we called it Pedestrian Exterminator. The whole idea of it was take Grand Theft Auto, but without any of the freedom, and you just mow pedestrians down. Right.
And you get different points for
different points, because it's like, oh, that lady is on a walker. Well, that's going to be like 10 less points because she's easier to hit and it does damage to your car.
Yeah.
And mind you, there wasn't even, PlayStation wasn't even out at this time, so we were like little kids.
Yeah. I think the closest thing to this must have been that motorcycle game,
Road Rash,
which is all that you would do with it anyways.
Right.
You just like drive to the side and
you beat people with your club.
Yeah.
Which character was the most valuable to hit? Like, what was the
I don't even know.
The Nirvana character.
I think it might have been Children.
Yeah.
Which we thought was hilarious because we were children.
Because we were children. And we talk. It's so funny to think that we talked about this in great depth for like years.
In public, it was fine.
Yeah.
Another thing, so that's one bullet point. The other one, this is one of my first experiences of Fitz, was the Great Potato. So thanks to L. Ron Hubbard, Fitz got this wonderful idea.
Yeah, so growing up, I was obsessed with cults.
Me too.
And yeah, just
bit, yeah.
still absolutely fascinated by them. I have a collection of pamphlets from any cult that has ever handed them out to me. And I learned how to code HTML at a very young age. I think I was like 12 or 13. And this was back in the day where there were really no programs to do it. You had to do it through a text editor. And the first website I created was for the Great Potato. And this was a cult based around the Great Potato, who had many eyes and was watching you constantly.
Sure.
And for some context, Ben grew up in a Christian household, and I was there to bring as much satanic work into his life as I possibly could. And that started with the Great Potato. And Ben thought it was hilarious, and I got dozens of hits. Dozens of hits. This was on
racking up the hits.
This was on GeoCities. Yeah. And I had a potato that I drew in MS Paint, and it had the entire doctrine there. The guest books, which were a thing back then.
He had this whole story.
And how old were you at the time? This helps me with
12.
12. I love
it. And like part of this was based off of a joke from the show. Was it Dinosaurs?
I think so.
The Muppet Dinosaurs.
Right.
Yeah.
So you basically at 12 invented a cult.
He started a cult.
You started a cult.
And the point there was, while I was learning about cults and religions, I was like, well, if I can conceivably make up a religion I can make up religious holidays, and then I can get those holidays off at school.
Yeah.
That was the like
I see the logic.
that was the main reason. And so naturally I went for the most believable cult, one about potatoes.
I think it started with like that joke. Why do you not have sex in a potato field?
I don't know the answer.
Go on.
But because they call them eyes on the potatoes, right? Yeah. That's why you don't have. I don't know. I don't remember the rest of the joke.
I feel like Ben just destroyed that punchline.
Well, it's like it was similar to the why do you not tell lies in a cornfield because of the ears or whatever.
All of the eyes. Sure.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, tracks.
That's what I thought of.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Wow.
And so he used to call me that. I think we actually talked about this with Sawblade, but Fitz was the first person ever to say Ben states the obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ben does state the obvious.
Every now and
I
then.
have never been a kind friend to Ben.
No.
Beyond the umbrella. Yeah, so I have had some.
That was
sort
like your
of-
first and last good deed.
Yeah,
you did.
that was it. It was- he totally misread the situation and the person, and but I have had some sort of web presence and some sort of creative project out since then.
Yeah.
So for 30 years,
yeah.
no, 20 years.
I mean, that's why I always found you interesting no matter what you were up to, even though our worlds would only cross once in a while, usually at
Yeah,
music events.
which is unfortunate.
I
but-
know, but you were always working on something super cool. There was always creativity happening.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had a lot of weird projects, and most of them were not successful, but that's because it was an audience of one. I made them for myself, and if you were crazy enough to enjoy them yourself, that was great.
So, segue, or not a segue, side note, sidebar, whatever. I'm on top of it today, guys. Can't you tell?
I'm a little off it too, so it's perfect. It's Monday.
Hey,
For fuck's sake.
Yeah. And so I don't know if you. Oh yeah, so you hadn't seen the episode about me, and I can't remember if it was in the final one that made it. So the day that Osama died,
oh yeah, we were on acid.
we were on acid.
Yeah.
I remember you talking
you
about this. I don't know
motherfucker.
if it
So-
actually made it in the. But anyway, I want to hear this.
Okay, so I had some acid, and I had tested it out on my own, and it was great, and I had a fantastic time. And I was just kind of, Ben and I were roommates at the time, and I was cleaning the apartment, and was like, fuck it, I'm going to do some acid. Like, by the time I'm done cleaning, it's going to kick in, and it'll be a great time. And I did the responsible things, like, hey, Ben, just so that you know, if I'm a little weird, that's because I just dropped acid. And Ben was like, give me hand to mouth now, do. So I was like, okay, well, if I hand this to you, I have like 2 rules. 1, you keep your phone off. And 2,
I forgot this part.
we stay wherever you drop. Like, I'm not doing the whole, like, let's go out on an adventure thing. It always ends bad. It's always a stupid damn idea. And the phone, like, it's just, you're on drugs. Don't contact the outside world. What are you doing?
Yeah.
I should have listened to those rules for the rest of my
Ben
life.
didn't adhere any of that and immediately texted everyone he knew because he just got a new number and spent the entirety of his trip texting everyone. So I'm a little aggro because of it, but still trying to have a good time, and I'm trying to make the most of it.
mind
and
you-
trying not to be pissed off that my only 2 rules have been broken. And
Broken.
Mind you, I probably didn't text that much, but when I was texting, he probably noticed it 100
immediately,
times more.
yeah,
Because
immediately.
I remember watching all of Team America once we saw that Osama died.
Oh
We
my
saw
God.
Osama died
So-
and we put on Team
But
America.
had Ben not been on his phone, and I'm not sure if this is a good thing or not, someone texted him and was like, hey, Osama died. And in my head, I'm like, that is some world-shattering news. Like, oh, my God. And here I am, like, a head full of acid. And Ben is like, I want to shoot my gun. I'm like, don't shoot your gun. And he's like, that's the American thing to do, though. That I'm a patriot. We got to go do that. So I had to talk Ben down
From
from
shooting
fire.
his gun on acid.
Yeah.
A head full of acid, be like, do you think, Ben, being a minority, on drugs, firing into the air is a good idea. Do you think that's something you will survive from? Is the cops are in this area? How about
He's my
we
voice
don't?
of reason.
Yeah.
So we didn't. Instead, we watched Team America and sang that song.
America.
Fuck yeah!
Yeah.
Coming to save the motherfucking day, yeah. we played that for like hours, I think.
Yeah.
But that was my first ever trip on acid. And
Oh, that was the first time for you.
Yeah, that was his first time, and yeah, acid has always been a friend to me. I am one of the few individuals that really likes to do it alone, and that's not because I'm self-conscious when I do it. It's just that I can really learn things about myself. You know, you're always told don't look in a mirror. That is one of the first things that I do.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm going to stare at you, and we are going to go deep, and I'm going to figure things out. One of my favorite things to do on acid is to go to a museum, like an art museum, because they are open for most of the day. They have great visuals, and only eccentric people go to art museums anyway. So if you are looking at something sideways or being weird, people are like, oh, yeah. He just really likes art.
I just pictured you.
And there, you know, when you hallucinate, art moves around and it breathes or it vibrates. And when you see pieces of art in person, even sober, it is a very moving experience.
For sure.
Because you get to see the actual texture of the painting or see how large or how small something is. You know, like a lot of modern art paintings are as big as a wall, and they may only be like 3 colors or whatever. And so if you see a picture of that on your phone, you're like, oh, that's bullshit. But if you see it in person, you're like, oh, wow, okay, this actually took like 3 weeks to build.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, hallucinogens are fun.
So I have a theory. You correct me if this theory is wrong or not. Would you, well, I'm going to start by asking you a question. Would you say that you're like a caretaker of people? Do you take care of people?
Yeah, when I can't help it.
Yeah. That would be my sense.
In the context of drugs, I have like, if other people are doing drugs, I'm the babysitter.
Yeah, I think that's the issue, right? That's the theory, because I just knowing what little I know about you, it seems like that's why I understand you'd want to do it alone, because there's this pressure, whether you like it or not, to make sure that other
everybody
people
else
are
is
doing
having
okay.
fun. Yeah,
and having
which
fun.
is why I have like those sort of roles. But
Yeah.
like growing up, I have a sister in quotation marks. We're not related. She wasn't foster. She was just my mother's friend's daughter. Went through some hard times, and my mother took her in.
Your fucking mom sounds amazing, by the way.
Yeah, she was.
Robin was
Just so you know,
She was a fucking saint.
I've
So,
never heard anything about her before this right here, and she just sounds like an amazing lady. So,
so she took this girl in, and as far as I was concerned growing up, she was my big sister. And they took care of her till she was 18, and she moved out on her own. And then she did it again with my sister's partner. Was going through hard times when we were teenagers. He didn't have a place to live. He was kicked out. And my mother was like, you can live here. And he didn't have any kind of like...
They haven't been able to get rid of him yet either.
Yeah, same. You know, he grew up in a very hard family and didn't really have a mother figure himself, and she became that for him. So I unfortunately have a deep-seated need to show empathy, and that has held me back my whole life.
you think so?
No. Wouldn't trade it with anything. Yeah.
Just making sure.
But
Sure.
the other thing is, I feel like you have that, especially if you're the one who supplies something, you kind of feel that responsibility too, because you're like, I'm hosting this party.
Yeah, no, totally. And like, especially with like psychoactive drugs.
And your crazy friends who have never tried them. And
Yeah.
he's like, man, Ben has mental problems without doing drugs. This is going to be weird. But I thought at the end
Just
of the
wanna-
day, it was a good day.
Reiterate, Ben had straight A's before he met me.
Well, what it was I learned I learned through homeschooling. When I was homeschooling, so I didn't know this until later, but and I don't know how I did it, but my mom was like, "Oh yeah, you taught yourself to read." It's like, "How did I do that?" And she was like, "You just started looking at the material, whatever." But so I realized at a young age, the faster I get done with work, the more I get to play.
True.
That was and my my household was pretty hard to be in for me.
That's an understatement.
When I was a child, because I think it's because the older siblings were girls, and when I was starting to get older, my dad was I was the fall guy. So then Sevi was too much of a baby, like not a baby, but he was too young, you know.
Yeah.
And then the others were girls, so there was Ben. And so I had a very difficult time staying at home, so I would finish everything I needed to do.
If
and leave.
you said the phrase "dad's home" around their dog, the dog would go running into a corner. For context.
Yeah.
Wow.
My dad's made a lot of improvements, and now he's actually a great human. And I think Fitz might agree with that.
Yeah, I don't want to speak ill against him, but there are
But when we were kids, it was
the
bad.
sins of the past are pretty fucking heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So forgiven but not forgotten.
yeah, and then when my dad would be interesting to have on here, because if you hear about my dad's childhood, I'm like, man, my child, it makes me think like, man, my dad was pretty great.
Yeah.
But anyways, that's part of how I was always gone. But that's why I had such good. It was like, okay, if this would get me out of the house.
I knew from a young age that Ben had it hard, and anytime he would reach out, I would try to be available.
Yeah.
I'm introverted. He's way too extroverted. So I don't naturally reach out to others when I probably should, but yeah, I've always tried to be there.
And so Fitz will tell you time and time again, I would just show up. It got to the point like I lived miles away from him, and I would walk to his house, and he'd still be sleeping.
Yeah, because I'm a natural night owl.
Yeah.
And he's not. So he'd be like, it's 10 o'clock. Why aren't you awake? I'm like, because I was up till 4 having an existential crisis at 16.
Yeah.
Oh, what do you want from me?
But
Normalcy? That's not me.
so I guess we'll keep going. So that we shared a lot of childhood memories.
Right. You were Fitz's place was a safe haven for you.
Yeah.
A little bit, and I get it. I get the dynamic for sure.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah. And we could honestly reminisce on this nostalgia for hours.
Yeah.
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 Especially because we haven't seen each other in like a year.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I don't know. Keep going.
Yeah.
So you feel like you guys kind of cover the Tahoe and the childhood to a certain degree. Is there other stuff that
The only other thing I would want to mention from my childhood would be being dyslexic. So I was put into a special ed class at an early age because I could not read. I think in kindergarten or whatever, I was falling behind. And that's, in my mind, that's because I was asking philosophical questions. They'd be like, oh, well, a lowercase d is like a doorknob. And that's how you know its orientation. And it'd be like, a doorknob can be on either side, though. So that doesn't help me. And they'd just be like, shh. Blah, 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 blah. And so they put me in special ed. And I do have dyslexia, which is a form of aphasia, but it's not very strong. And so I learned how to read fairly quickly. Spelling was always hard for me, which is hilarious that I'm an author now, but I have learned how to deal with it. I still occasionally read phrases wrong,
Right.
but I can know from context that my brain is being dumb and that's not what I think that says. But because the school was so small, they needed a certain amount of kids in special ed to keep the budget there,
Keep the
to
funding.
keep the
Oh, yeah.
program.
Yeah.
So I stayed in special ed until I was 18.
So you started, what grade did you start special ed? From,
I think
Real early.
first grade.
fuck.
And so I would be pulled out of class in the early days. So I was already separated
Yeah.
from most of my peers and put with very troubled kids. Jesse immediately comes to mind, who was my friend and I adored. And he protected me from bullies, which was great.
That kid's had a hard life.
That kid had a real hard life. And so growing up, I had a chip on my shoulder about being dumb. And I was definitely made fun for all of this and like bullied and whatnot. And it created a huge disinterest for me in school. I didn't see a reason to try if I was always going to be put in the back of the class.
Yeah.
And because my mind works differently than most, teachers didn't really know how to handle me.
Right.
I am a very abstract, random thinker. I go big picture first and then work my way down from there. So I don't have a very structured way of thinking. So math was hard. And the moment I became an adult in high school, I opted out and started thriving.
You just left school when you, or did you graduate?
Well, I turned 18 the last year of high school.
Okay.
Yeah.
Halfway through our
And
senior year.
because I was an adult, I then had the choice of continuing the program or not. So I opted out. And depending on, they might argue that this was a success story, but I was then in like advanced placement programs after that. My last year of high school was the first time I was on the honor roll. But I would say that's because I was actually able to be around my peers
Yeah.
and like not have a totally separate life from them. I don't want to disparage secondary learning programs or special education. I think they've come a long way than they did, but back in the 90s, just about everyone with any kind of problem was fed drugs.
Yeah.
Yep.
You have ADHD, here's drugs. Spoiler, every kid has ADHD.
Yeah.
They're children. So before we move on, I need to mention that is a large part of my life and my personality. It's something that like I talk to my therapist about that I want to like move on from. But because I do have a form of dyslexia and because it does pop up from time to time, I am always cognitively aware of my past.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so would you say you believe the hype, like when you were going through this, or was there a transition period? I'm trying to ask this in a way that's clear, but you were obviously, let's say by others, seen as dumb because you were in special ed, right?
Sure.
Did you believe it, or did you just, or was there a point where you believed it and then you're like, wait a second, I'm not fucking dumb. This is a dumb, broken system. And
Yeah, I sort of believed it for a time.
yeah,
But I would talk around my teachers and my peers would be a couple years behind in knowledge.
sure.
So at some point I was like, hey, maybe I have the smart thing in brain and aren't the dumb baddie
Brain work good.
that I
Yeah.
think I am.
Baddie,
So
what-
like I think that the program worked, but I should have been pulled out of it
Yeah.
at a much earlier age.
and like, so this is the dude who makes Tesla coils, right?
Yeah. Obviously
And
an
so-
intelligent guy, right?
Yeah.
So
And my whole life, I'm like, Fitz is like one of the smartest people
Yeah.
I know because he's coding and he's doing all this crap. And mind you, there are no programs to support anything that he was into. There is nothing down there that could support any sort of growth if you weren't either a musician in music
Or football.
or well, not football because New York North House sucked at that. But
Well, we sucked because it was a graduating class of 90, Ben.
yeah,
And a football team needs
yeah.
a lot of players.
Well, not only that, but I mean, it was, what it was.
I guess snowboarding would be
Snowboarding.
Yeah.
Snowboarding, skiing, and the band program is how a lot of people got scholarships.
Which makes Tahoe so weird.
Yeah. So people were pro athletes from when we were in middle school.
Right.
But in order to have success in any of the things that Michael was into, if he was in a city, he probably would have thrived at his turning point would have started much earlier.
Or we go back to the classism, and if
Yeah.
you
If he was in a
guys
higher-
were super wealthy,
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
you would have. I could just see it now. Instead of being tracked into this special ed track that you got stuck in for the
Yeah.
entirety of your your
Well, it's
primary education,
You would have went to Ride Out.
Yeah, you would have went to some fucking STEM school.
It's weird because my partner came from a higher class, and she will talk about like her experiences growing up and all of the programs that she had. Like they had a swimming pool, they had a marching band, they had coding, they had woodworking and all of these things, and we had a Mark Twain impersonator.
That's so fucking tragic. And I know they're getting better about special education. I know they're getting better. I work in education, sort of, with
Sure, and these were
individualized learning and things like
this
that.
was the first time they were really trying to implement anything.
Yeah.
So just like early psychology, it was a little brutal.
Yeah, no kidding.
I mean, they weren't shocking us or anything, but
Well, no, I'm doing
just
that
kidding.
myself now with my Tesla coils.
Yeah.
So,
and so, and I can remember from a very early age, like we always all got free lunch, and so because I had a lisp, they'd put me in these classes, and all I remember about the classes was that every time I went, they gave me candy. They gave me candy, and they tried to make me feel good about having a lisp, and then they put this crazy stuff in my mouth that cut the shit out of my tongue whenever I would speak, so my mouth would always be bleeding.
So dyslexia, speech impediment.
Mm-hmm.
Let's drop everybody in the same bucket
Yeah,
and call them special needs.
and
special
like
education.
honestly,
Yeah.
most of the kids who were there, like I mentioned to Jesse, he wasn't there because he was dumb or because he had a learning disability. He was there because he was poor.
Yeah.
Because he came from a broken home and because he acted out at school and at authorities.
Yeah.
And
Because he had no
and
fucking structure at home.
right,
his-
and this was the only place they could think
And he actually wasn't
put him.
that bad off financially, but it was a very broken home, and so it was more so.
Ben, compared to you, everyone was doing well financially. Like, he was not doing well, buddy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's valid.
But so, I mean, well, this is super interesting. Obviously, I knew none of this about you, and that's obviously defined a good portion of who you are and what you've done and where you're going and what you look. Just this upbringing, being mislabeled essentially, right? Or
Yeah, not necessarily mislabeled, but being in an environment that I outgrew for too long.
Yeah. You weren't.
If that makes more
you didn't
sense.
have the opportunity to thrive when other kids did, probably, and that sucks.
Well, and
In school.
Yeah,
in school,
In school.
and I think to be completely honest, if you weren't, you still wouldn't have had a lot of the opportunities.
No, I wouldn't because the
we grew,
school
because we were on the
was
wrong,
poor.
Yeah.
so to speak. We were on the wrong side of the tracks.
So I'm self-taught in most things,
Yeah,
and I've just always kind of naturally been that.
he's very curious, and he's good. He's like you. He's good with researching, and
Yeah.
he will dive super deep.
Well, that's one thing that stuck out for me right out of I was trying to think about aspects that I remember because we've met. I don't know how many times we've hung out for a few hours.
Sure, always a good time, too, yeah.
Right, but I like to pay attention to like I do a lot of analysis. I watch people a lot, and it was obvious, like very intelligent, curious, creative. Definitely doesn't think in a linear way. All these things like are very obvious to me when I met you, and so they also are interesting for me to be around people who are different. And because
Totally.
I live in a very binary world with work and a lot of the shit I do. So I'm always trying to get around the artists. And, you know, that's why I know Ben. And that's why I hang out with different people who just do stuff that I might not even be into.
We gravitate towards each other.
But the fact that you guys are into this thing or that thing makes me super excited. Like, I love seeing passion and interest in stuff that I don't even care about. It's almost enough, you know?
And it's so funny if you were to, from an outsider looking in, seeing Fitz and I growing up all our life together, they probably were like, how the hell?
It doesn't make a lick of sense.
Like, why are these
doesn't
two
make
kids
a
friends?
lick of fucking sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going off doing like whatever craziness I'm into, and he's like super into studying on his own, and just I don't know. We just
He would bring me to his youth groups while I was reading Aleister Crowley.
Yeah. And riding and putting your cult together.
Yeah. I like, and we can stop talking about my childhood. But
It's fascinating, though, man.
This one stands out as being kind of hilarious to me. I don't remember how I got my hands on it, but I got a copy of Monty Python's Holy Grail. It was a VHS, and I watched it and was like, this is hilarious. Ben needs to see it. But I knew in my head that if we got caught, like, his mother would have freaked the fuck out, because it's a sacrilegious movie.
Yeah.
Like, now she would probably be like, yeah, whatever.
like, I'm praying for you guys.
Yeah. your mom has been praying for me.
For
my
me
whole
too.
life.
For both of us our entire lives.
Good on your mom, though.
My mom absolutely adores Fitz.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I adore her too. She's always been nothing but a sweetheart to me.
So it's so, even though your mom was your mom Catholic?
My father was Catholic. My
father was
mother was Protestant, but she also had a lot of Wiccan tendencies.
Okay. And so
because she was a hippie. So I did grow up Catholic, which would account for all of the guilt I feel all of the time.
Figured out how to get rid of that. When you figure it out, let me know.
It's 90% of what I talk to my therapist about.
Dude, I'm telling you, I grew
They'll be
up
like,
Roman
how was your
Catholic.
day? I'm like, I'm sorry I'm burdening you today. Like, you have to hear about all of my shit. Like, that's so sad. And he's like, stop with the guilt.
Yeah.
but so one way that our moms were very similar, two of the most selfless women that you've ever met.
Yeah, and they both volunteered to help out in preschool,
Yeah.
which was a program that would not have existed in that town without
Very cool.
volunteers.
Yeah.
You know?
And yeah. And so Robin was my second mom, pretty much.
She
Very
was
cool.
to a lot of people.
Yep,
Yeah,
she was.
She was
Sounds
to a
like
lot of
it.
people.
And then she passed when we were. It was
She died when I was 19.
yeah. That's right.
So she had a spinal injury from a drunk driving incident before I was born, and was constantly in pain. She had a titanium rod up her spine, and I think she had 5 discs that were broken.
Yeah.
So she was always dealing with pain, and
And still so loving, and you would never know.
had a surgery when I was like 15, where they were going to just like basically weld the discs together
Yeah.
with plates instead. And
Yeah, they put a cage around. They'll fuse that
yeah,
shit. Yeah.
and so she was one of the first to be a part of this program, and they prescribed her opiates, and she got addicted. And I don't know if they botched the surgery because she was still always in pain, or if the pain now was just withdrawal. But she spent the last years of her life dying. And so she overdosed on her regular dosage, because opium is a monster.
Yeah.
Oxycontin when I was 19.
Yeah.
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 It was. Yeah. And so, if I remember correctly, I flew back to.
Yeah, I told you it happened, and you immediately showed up and played your guitar at her funeral.
Yeah. And which and I guess I said, and thinking back to it, like she meant that much to me to where I don't know how I got back because I definitely didn't have the money for it. But I made a way. That's like how we're brothers like that.
Yeah.
Like that I had no way, and I probably owe somebody money to this day that I've suckered them into giving me money so I could fly back to get the top. Yo, I need this money.
Yeah.
It'll be like that time I got a PlayStation 2 when I just borrowed $1 from a bunch of random people until I had the money.
Yeah.
But anyways,
Cool. Well, so there's, I mean, if we transition a little bit, because
Please.
I feel like there's a lot of, well, first, let's talk about the kilt for a second, because
Let's.
I've always been jealous of, I've never seen you in anything but a kilt. Is it a Utilikilt by brand, or do you have a bunch of different ones? Do you only have one? How does it work?
This one is not.
Okay.
Most of the kilts I own are Utilikilt. They are more on the expensive side, but I have kilts that I had bought 10 years ago that are fine. That are still good, that I can still wear. So I have 7 pairs of kilts, and I have 2 pairs of pants. One is for interviewing, and the other is for funerals. Like pretty much.
Fuck yeah. This is what I would have assumed, but I wanted to know. So you just roll through the kilts, and that's your thing, and that will probably always be your thing?
They're comfy as all shit. I mean, I didn't think I would transition fully into a kilt, but after wearing one, like, pants suck. Fuck that. Like, they're uncomfortable. They're sweaty. Your keys jab into your thighs. Like, no. Just no. They're bad.
and so shortly
Pants are for women.
And so shortly after, so this makes me, as we transition, shortly after Fitz moved up here, we convinced Mike Stabilito and Tony Moniz to moving up here also.
I know those guys, yep.
And so we all had a house, the 5 of us from Truckee. We all had a house.
Oh, yeah, let's tell these stories, please. Yeah, let's do that.
Or
I think
not.
I went to a party at that house a couple times.
And so that was what I was going to go into. Is we used to, for whatever reason, we'd throw these epic parties.
Yeah,
like,
man.
We threw them because you're an extrovert who doesn't know boundaries, Ben.
I can totally see
that
that.
too. But we would have
Unwilling participant 50 to 60% of the time.
Okay. Yeah, half the time for sure. But so I will never forget, and we used to have these like epic beer pong tournaments where we would just do this crazy stuff. But I'll never forget this one party where we had so many people in the house, and it might have been one of the ones that you came to, where we literally had so many people in the house. There were like people on the lawn, and you couldn't move.
It was pretty busy, the one I went to.
There were like people on, and from all sorts of different groups, people on the deck, people in the main room. And so we used to, it was shortly after 300 came out. And so everybody would be like, do you not want me to tell this one?
No, I'd rather not.
Okay.
I'd rather not.
All right. So never mind.
Did somebody get drop kicked?
No.
No,
Okay.
no.
Just me. Gotcha.
No. But it was
We'll leave it mysterious.
Yeah.
We'll just.
it was a very epic happening.
Yeah, I was not happy with the environment, to say the least.
Well, isn't it one of those things, like the things that we, I used to just compartmentalize it to romantic relationships, like the things that your partner or potential partner is attracted to initially is ultimately the thing that drives them fucking crazy, and they
Sure,
never change about
because
it. But I think it can extend
it's
to
that
friendships
way with
as well.
friendship,
Yeah,
too.
exactly.
Because you fall in love with the eccentricities and what makes them weird. But when it gets down to it, you're like, I'm not that, so don't like that. But no, I've been wearing a kilt for many years. I used to shovel snow in one. Yeah, they're more comfortable. They're better fit for the male anatomy. Like, I'm always comfortable.
Yeah.
And wearing one has also just made me give less of a fuck in life. People are always staring, and I'm okay with that. And, a lot of people just see it as a skirt, which it is. and that might offend them if they're homophobic or they believe in like some really toxic masculine things. And that's hilarious to me.
I never even thought about that piece of it, like the potential gender.
Yeah, some people are just
judgment
like, why
stuff.
are you wearing a dress? And it's like, because my balls are too big for pants.
Wow, that's ridiculous.
What do you want?
Yeah.
And so it is sort of an act of rebellion, but for the most part, it's just comfy.
Yeah, it's just a comfy.
It's just comfy.
It's like a comfortable rebellion.
Man, Ed, when he first moved up, like there were a couple times where, like, I would be like, he wouldn't care, but I'd be like, you don't fucking talk about Fitz like that, and so I'd be like trying to like fight these dudes over
Sure.
something.
Because
he
somebody
would do.
says something about the kilt.
I'm like, no, you don't talk about my fucking friend like that.
That's hilarious.
But in my romantic relationships, it's easy access. And
Totally.
so, I don't
And
know.
you can also hide what you're doing, kind of.
Yeah, and it also, like, it puts me down a couple of notches when I am like, it's a skirt. Like, I'm wearing a skirt, and that's weird. And that's okay. Because clothing is bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
And the gender roles that we put in clothing is bullshit. And people really just need to, like, let loose and give up these assumptions we have out there.
And the craziest part to me is this, like, and maybe it's just because I don't know, like, I've never been like, you're wearing a skirt. I'm like, oh, that's, well, you want to go into your heritage, and then I not realizing he wasn't Scottish, but
Yeah, no, I am Irish. I'm not Scottish.
Yeah.
but
If people ask me, they're like, "Oh, you wear that because you're Scottish?" I'll just say yes because I'm.
like, yeah,
You
sure.
don't want to get it. Yeah, it's a yeah.
But and so it's so weird to me that happens, especially now, especially in Seattle.
Yeah.
Yeah, it still happens.
You're like,
Surprising.
It happened at a drag show once, and that's the last place I would.
you're
think
wearing a
so.
skirt, like,
It's like there's Bob the drag queen over there. What are you offended by? Yeah.
To me, it just seemed ultimately. I didn't even think about all these issues, but it just always seemed very utilitarian.
Oh, it's practical as hell.
And I can appreciate that.
The pockets in these things are deep. They come off of your hips, so like you can carry more things. And
Right. I was thinking about what weapons I can have with me.
sure,
That's where my mind goes.
I do get patted down less at shows because the guys at the door don't want to risk anything.
they're like, no, I'm good.
Yeah, they're like, it's like, what do you have under your kilt? It's like socks and boots.
I love it.
Yeah,
Well, thank you for
entertaining that.
entertaining. And then I mean, you've mentioned it a few times. The authoring. You've done comic books too, comics as well, right? And novels.
Yeah, I did a webcomic for a number of years, and I write novels now.
Yeah.
Yeah. The webcomic was called Mr. Square, which
I think I read it, or I've definitely read it before.
I'm so
Yeah.
sorry.
I definitely posted every one I ever
Yeah,
read.
I think maybe I got it from Ben, but somebody's.
I loved them. They're hilarious.
I
Yeah.
wrote about 400 of them, and most of them I would do if I were inebriated. So I have a disclaimer there that says, like, these comics were done outside of sobriety. There will be spelling mistakes. The author has no recollection of what this is about. So
perfect.
basically, don't email me because I don't know.
/ don't care.
And it's very abstract and absurdist and Dadaistic. It is not for a wide audience by any means. And I did it for myself and just tried to inject as much abstract humor as I could.
And it was awesome.
Is it like cathartic, like a release?
It was then. It became a chore.
Got it.
Like I said, I did 400 of them, which is ridiculous. And it centered around a talking square that was easy to draw
When you were drunk or
while
on
I was
something?
drunk or stoned or whatever.
Yeah.
And Lovecraftian horrors would happen around him. And that was the butt of the joke every time. Ben adores it. I don't know why. It had a weird fan base. Someone got a Mr. Square tattoo.
I would totally do that today.
You would get a tattoo of a burrito because you have a tattoo of a burrito.
He does.
So the threshold of what you would get tattooed is not very high, Ben.
Yeah. The
No,
bar's
but
pretty low.
that one would that one
You should
would
get
be
a
pretty-
tattoo of his comic.
Oh, God,
dude,
don't.
though.
No.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
sheep of the
Definitely.
sheep.
Oh, yeah, there was a crazy talking sheep that has a weird following. He was pathologically enthusiastic and was the funny man to the Mr. Square straight man. Yeah, I did have fun making them, but it became a chore.
Yeah.
Just making comics like you would do in the funny papers gets very tiring and you run out of ideas.
Yep.
This is why Jim Davis has stolen ideas from himself. A lot of his early work he has redrawn and just repurposed and put out as a new gag as Garfield because he can't be fucking bothered to come up with another goddamn joke about lasagna, and who could blame him? So that's how I started to feel with Mr. Square. But my passion has always been writing. And
And has it always been prose? Like,
yeah, it's always been storytelling first. So
Okay.
that's manifested in other ways. But my passion is writing. And so the past 3 to 4 years, I've been writing and publishing novels, and are pretty stoked about it.
are you doing them all ebook, like downloadable, or have you actually published like a hard
Oh,
copy?
there are physical copies.
Oh,
If I
okay.
can do an awkward thing, I have.
Oh yeah, do an awkward thing.
This is what I wanted you to do.
Yeah.
I have a book here.
Let me see it.
It's called A Happy Bureaucracy.
This is the one I have.
Yeah,
This is the
that's
one I
likely
have.
the one that you have.
Do you have hard copies of the other one?
Not with
other
me. No. There are 3 books in the series. I published the 3rd book just a month ago.
I was gonna say I know that you had a second. I didn't know about the third. Actually, no. I think you texted me telling me that you had just done the
Yeah,
third.
it was probably really offhand though, because I can't be bothered to be braggadocious about anything that I do.
By the way, for people that are just listening, 2 things. Fitz was able to put that book. He pulled the book out of his kilt, which you probably wouldn't even have assumed. Like, how many people can pull a book out of their pants? Not that many.
Yeah,
Not
only,
a book of that size.
Not a book of that size. That's a sizable book you pulled out of your kilt.
Yeah,
I'm
thank you.
impressed. One more pro.
Do you have hard copies at your house?
In my own personal collection, but I can get more.
Okay.
So
Well, I was wondering
Quick-
because I have that one, but I was
quick caveat: I don't like it when my friends buy my books because that messes with Amazon's algorithms.
Oh, it does?
Yeah, so I write post-apocalyptic parody, and so I want readers who read post-apocalyptic books to buy it.
Not just some friends who are trying to fluff you up a little
Right, and Amazon's robots aren't super clever, so if they see a bunch of people who have like bought a Mad Max book or whatever, they'll be like, okay, we market to this. But like creative people are eclectic and we all read really bizarre things on a range of things. Like I personally will do historic biographies and then pick up sci-fi and then pick up humor and just a wide variety of genre.
Sure.
And if I were to buy the book, or my friends would, the robots wouldn't know what to do with that. It would just like shrug and then it wouldn't sell my books. So
then you're gonna have to either give me one of your copies,
pretty much.
or you're gonna have to get some for yourself, and because I have that one, but I need the other ones.
Is there they're not a series. They all stand individually on their own?
They are in a series and there is an overarching story to them.
Okay.
You could potentially read them out of order, but it would be best enjoyed one after the other.
Right.
Yeah. And so a happy bureaucracy is a post-apocalyptic parody wherein the IRS is the last government institution to survive World War III.
Okay.
So a nuclear holocaust. And that is based in some real life research that I've done. The IRS has plans in the real world to survive nuclear winter. And once they do, they will take a census of the last remaining humans and then tax them. And that's the plan. They're just going to start taxing again. And it is at once the most like optimistic view of a nuclear holocaust that like, yeah, we'll just pick up where we left off, and also just absurdly wrong.
Right. It's a smaller population, but they're still
right. And like, it's in good faith because you need taxes to build society.
Sure.
Without taxes, you don't have a society. But the idea that the bombs will fall and we just get to like go out and collect taxes is absurd. So I couldn't help but to write a book about that. So
fantastic idea.
Think like you're watching Mad Max Fury Road, and they're at the pinnacle of their chase, and you have all of these warlords just like throwing people like they're bombs.
There's like a guitar dude with
it's absolute anarchy and madness.
Yeah.
And then all of the action comes to a halt because the warlord needs to be audited. And there's just these dorky taxmen in like ties that are just like, so have you counted your bullet spending? Or like, we could really write off some of the cars you did for business reasons, but we really need to like get this in a wrap now because you owe. And as an institution, the IRS is a very scary and powerful one. They brought down the mob back in the 30s.
Yeah.
Like, the only reason that Capone was thrown in jail was because his tax returns didn't meet his income. The FBI couldn't bring him down. So they, on top of that, they would have the muscle to be like, hey, warlord, you need to pay your taxes. So
fucking love it.
The book follows someone who grew up in one of these government bunkers, who is a tax auditor, who is supposed to go out and do a census, and he's paired with an enforcer, sort of like a bodyguard, and she grew up in the wastes, just a totally different place, and it's like drugs are hand to mouth while he clicks his pen all the time because he's nervous. And they are tasked to go collect taxes. And I just sort of let the natural humor in these characters poke through.
That's amazing.
What's the second one called?
The second one is Fear and Loathing in the Wasteland.
And the third?
Post-Apocalyptic Pirates.
That's right.
That one just came out a month ago?
Yeah, that came out last month.
I think I saw the post on that one.
Which is my most batshit insane work, just hands down. It is unhinged. It really runs with the title.
Why do you think that one's the most unhinged?
I've established the characters well at that point, and I figure that the audience knows what they're getting into. So I was less reserved in writing it.
I see.
Yeah. Once you've picked up a book about post-apocalyptic taxes, if you can get through that and be like, yeah, I want to read the next book, then it's like, all right, you have a high tolerance for crazy shit, so let's just really let that out.
One of the funny realizations I had during this, sorry, it's a little bit of a sidetrack back to Mr. Square, but I was like, man, I'm the fucking sheep, and Fitz is the square. And Fitz is Mr. Square, and I'm the sheep. Like, just because of all this stuff where he's like, oh my gosh.
Oh, fuck.
It totally makes sense.
Yeah, you're the enthusiastic extrovert who's like, let's go do some crazy shit. I'm like, you're gonna get hurt. No.
Do you know all the bad things that could happen if we do this?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And
exactly.
I'm like, woo!
Yeah.
It just dawned on me, so sorry I had to. I was like, no wonder he hates the sheep.
Yeah.
It's like, why do people follow that sheep?
But yeah, I wrote the first book in a month.
And how long ago did you write the first book?
That was 2017.
Yeah.
Okay.
But The first draft I wrote in a month. It then took 4 to 5 more drafts to whip it into the kind of shape where I was comfortable with publishing it. I also took that time to build a mailing list and an audience to sell it to. So yeah, that went through several iterations, several different editors. And then I unleashed it to my audience, and they reviewed it and apparently really like it, because I have 5 stars right now.
Nice. So would you say, because this is a world, and if this is boring to talk about, by all means,
Not at all.
I'm just fascinated by this. Are you considered self-published then? Is that how that goes?
Yeah, I'm self-published.
Okay, and if you get a deal with like Penguin or somebody else like that, then they're the publisher. Is that how that?
Yeah,
how that kind of works. Okay.
They're the publisher, and
they'll take a piece. They'll provide the editors.
Oh, they'll take most of the profit, and unfortunately, the average income of a traditionally published author is under $12K.
That's fucking ridiculous.
And most books that get published don't make the money back, so the author
owes money.
When you're traditionally published, the publication will give you like a commission.
Yeah.
So they'll give you a certain amount of money and be like, hey, here's 20 grand or whatever. Once we sell 20 grand books worth, then you can start getting your royalties. And that's when you're supposed to make money.
Very much like the record companies, right? Like,
yeah. And most authors do not ever see royalties, and their books just kind of get buried. If you've ever, when you go to like a Barnes and Noble, if that's still a thing that exists.
In Issaquah, there's one.
You know, you see shelf upon shelf of books. The only ones that are being sold are books that have their cover faced out or that are on tables. Mm-hmm. And so 90% of the books there are going to be returned to the publication.
Interesting.
So, and this would be after you would have to jump through several different hoops to get published.
Yeah.
You would have to get an agent, and an agent is only going to look at you if you're already published. They only really put their money behind authors they know are going to do well, and those are ones that have already made them millions of dollars.
So it's like exactly like the music industry.
Yeah. So were you ever pursued by a publisher, or did you ever go out and seek it, or you just said, fuck it, I'm doing this myself?
I had a short story published in a magazine that is now defunct. But after learning about the process, I came to the quick realization that it just wasn't for me.
Yep.
And that there were plenty of self-published authors putting out work as good, if not better, than published work. And were making a living off of it. And so at least at this stage, all failure is my own. It wouldn't be because a company didn't decide to back me or push the kind of advertising. Like, if my books here fail or don't make me money, I can always write another one and try again.
Totally.
And learn more.
And you don't lose anything from that.
No, except for time, money, sweat, tears, and
but
relationships.
It is so weird seeing these businesses that are just hanging on to the old ways, right? Like record companies and like publishers.
Sure, yeah.
And they're just, and then the ecosystem that's structured around them, publishing, for instance, like Barnes and Noble, that's going away, and that it seems like a system that's breaking down pretty obviously.
Yeah. And the publishing industry, a lot of the ways that they do business came from the Great Depression.
Yeah.
Like they buy back copies of books to ensure the bookseller that they won't lose money. Mm-hmm. That's an old system that doesn't make sense, especially with digital copies.
Yeah.
That creates no inventory. It's a broken system. The publishers are still good, I think, because they do vet out a lot of crap from the slush pile.
There's probably a lot more noise to signal today because of accessibility.
Definitely
right?
is. There most certainly is. And, their editors are in-house and do specific genres. Now, I work with freelance, and one of these editors does work at a publication and does this on the side. So there is like there is an industry catered to self-publishing.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the cover of this book, I wouldn't have been able to get. Like,
Right.
that's an artist that knows the genre and is very good at what he does. So not to say that publication houses don't have a place, they're just not as forward-thinking.
Sure. Not as risk. They won't take the risks. Like,
Yeah, they won't take any risks.
Yeah.
And so a lot of books fall into like a homogenized genre that
Yep.
sucks.
Yeah.
You know, once you've read 3 space sci-fi novels, you've read them all. And there's a reluctance to change that up because they know that those 3 novels will always sell. But with self-publication, you can take risks. There are genres that have excelled because of self-publication that would not have been picked up otherwise. Lit RPG comes to mind. Think Ready Player One, but
Yep.
way more engrossed in like video games and whatnot. That genre isn't necessarily for me, but it thrives under self-publishing because it has an audience that has grown up on things like anime that are very thirsty for things like that.
Yeah.
So you may be serving a more niche market, but that niche market is thirsty.
Yeah.
And so are way more willing to buy than not.
Well, and I think the cool thing too, the niche markets, they can find each other now. You
Yeah.
know? And
Yeah.
so even if it is this niche market, there's people know how to get there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that just wasn't a thing. Even 2000, right? Like, we
Yeah,
just didn't-
even 20 years ago
Yeah.
for sure.
So,
But no, it's interesting. You mentioned, you know, the signal versus the noise.
yeah.
In self-publication, there is a lot of bullshit out there
Oh, for sure.
because anybody can publish, but at the same time, that stuff doesn't get seen because you need to learn how to market. You need to learn how to advertise outside of just like social media posts. So
Yeah.
the self-publication market does its own weeding through that. So although you may not have the publishing house that will say no to your really bad story, the market just kind of buries it,
Yeah.
and you only really see the good stuff.
Do you like that part of it? The marketing and getting it out there and doing all that stuff?
Surprisingly, yes.
Oh, see,
that is not an aspect of my personality that I thought was in me because, like, I did a book report on Abby Hoffman when I was like 13, right? Like, I have always had a knee-jerk reaction against the system and marketing in general. When I see it, pisses me off.
Right.
And I see the manipulation that people do and whatnot. But because this is a mechanism in my passion, because this is a means to an end, I've latched onto it, and I actually do really enjoy learning about it.
That's cool. I think I still struggle. That's even with this podcast, for instance, like getting
Yeah, we
distribution, getting it all, like, you know, getting it on the social, staying on top of all that. Like,
It sucks.
I
Yeah,
want
it sucks.
fucking nothing to do with that. But when it's not like I can
But
hire
if-
somebody right now.
But if you don't,
You gotta.
no one hears it.
I know you got to grind it out initially, right? It
It's-
just sucks.
It's a necessary evil, and
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily. It's not necessarily an evil.
It's just
right.
not what I enjoyed. I know some people love it. I just, that piece of it, like whenever it's been a creative
It's hard to
endeavor.
not feel like you're selling out,
The,
which
the,
which I get.
and the difficult part about it for Phil and I is we're both on that same trip where, and we want this to be, we have such big visions for this, and we have,
Sure.
and we've had a lot of people who are super interested in it, but what's been super interesting to me is how receptive Phil's people are to it, and how much, from most of the people I tell, they could give a crap less. But then there's like all these people from my past who are super interested in it.
Right.
Or,
You just have to find your audience
Yeah.
and know what they look like, which is the first battle. And
yeah.
I could talk about marketing all day with you guys if you would like at some point.
I might have to have a conversation with you about that. Just that is truly one of my biggest struggles.
But like as a basic, and for any creatives that do listen to this, mailing list is my biggest asset.
Yeah.
And so, you know, when you post on social media and you post your art on platforms that you don't own, you are at the whim of that company. They could change the algorithms, and then you don't get exposure.
Oh, dude.
Yep.
I mean, I'll give you an example. I just tried. I had to go through all these steps to get one podcast published on this one platform to be able to get onto Apple. And nothing was happening. Turns out because I have an F-bomb in the title. Yeah. I had no idea until I got deep into the weeds of the T's and C's an hour later trying to troubleshoot this thing. And I'm like, fuck, I hate doing this stuff.
It's like you look at Facebook.
Yeah.
6 years ago, if you, as a creative, had a Facebook page and you posted on there, you could get an organic reach fairly easily.
Yeah.
But you have to pay to play now. You have to advertise.
Yep.
Which is just another hoop to learn. And so I don't want to spend time building an audience and building a readership that I've worked very hard for, only to lose it at a faceless whim. So
Yes.
what I've done is, if you go to my website,
What is your website, by the way?
that's revfitz.com, REV, V as in Victor, FITZ, Z as in Z. And if you click free novel, you can choose one of two books that I have for free that are only available to people who sign up. And so you give me your email. I will then send you newsletters twice a month. You can unsubscribe, but you get a free book and you get to know what I'm doing, what's going on in my life.
Dude, but I'd love to get spam from you.
Stuff like that.
I would,
And, like
I would actually probably read that.
I would totally read that. Yeah.
All of my newsletters have a nihilistic horoscope where I make fun of horoscopes and
Perfect.
nihilism. And so, like, I try to make them entertaining to read, so it's not just marketing. I want my readers to enjoy it. But now I have a direct connection to my readers. I get to see who is engaged in it. I get to talk to them directly, and they email me back. And that has been, like, that is an asset in my creative journey that I could never let go.
Yeah.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Because now I have readers who tell me their stories, that tell me how much this meant to them, or what they didn't like.
Yeah.
And so because I have a mailing list, I can reach out to them directly. I'm not at the whims of some other company.
Yeah.
That said, it's still a lot of work.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, other people that put out newsletters, like you said, you're spam. Most email is spam, and you don't read it, and it's bullshit, and it's all sales, and you hate it. And so you have to work hard in building something that they want to open.
And something so interesting about this to me is I've met so many interesting people over the years, and a lot of them start different projects, and I'm like, man, you're so interesting to me. Send me stuff.
You want to learn about the creative people that you follow.
And then one of the things that has been very disheartening to me, which is why I'm excited to hear the way you do this, is I've read so many that are so they're so self-involved, where you just start reading them like, man, you really, this is just an ego thing. Like there's no art to it. And so I can relate to you on the fact that when people do reach out and you get to really connect with them, like that's my favorite part about music.
Oh, it's amazing.
That's why I give away my music. It's because I'd much rather have somebody come up to me after a show and
because
be like,
you want that connection.
Yeah. They're like, this touched me.
Like I have two readers that stand out on this, but the first one was an old trans man who now lives in Hawaii, grew up trans and in the closet in Poland in the 50s, which
Holy moly.
can't imagine the hell that looked. And he emailed me and was like, look, I like sci-fi, and reading sci-fi is what got me through the darkest places in my life. Like, without sci-fi and without authors like you, I probably wouldn't be alive without that sort of escapism. It's just like, so just want to let you know that, like, you are doing good and continue to do what you do.
And that stuff like fills your heart. It brings tears to your eyes because you're
Yeah,
like, dude.
no, for real. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I gave him a free book. Fuck yeah, I did.
Yeah, of course.
And that to me, that is success.
I also had a reader in Alaska mail me copies of the book because he wanted them signed. And
So cool.
bookmarked in one of these books was a Magic the Gathering card that was wrapped in something. I don't play Magic, which is one of the few geek things that I don't do.
Yeah.
So, you know,
You play one of the other ones, don't you?
no fault on him. Video games?
Oh, okay.
I don't really do the card. I do a lot of board games, though.
Yeah.
And the board, yeah, that's what I
Yeah,
was thinking.
board
of.
games are fun. But in this Magic card was 4 tabs of blotter acid.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So that happened. That's a
Did you ask him if it was for you, or did you?
his note said enjoy these
Okay.
free tickets.
I love it. So great.
I was gonna say, 'cause that'd be so funny if he just forgot where he left them. and he
Dude,
took
by the
them.
way, I accidentally sent you a book with all my acid in it.
Can you send that book back right now?
Because that's the thing a druggie would do. He'd be like, "Yo, I need that back."
What's my acid? Oh, no, I sent it to Fitz.
And so, like, and this wouldn't be out of the blue if you read my stuff, because
Yeah.
Yeah.
my books, I like to say they're like 1 part Mad Max meets 1 part Terry Gilliam's Brazil, and also Hunter S. Thompson.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of like feel that the book has. So someone sending me acid was kind of on brand.
Gotcha.
I'm so excited to get into them. I love post-apocalyptic, dystopian, I don't know, alternative.
Sure.
Yeah, all that stuff. And so anytime it smacks of that, but then there's a little extra to
Something
it.
different about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Because I've stopped a lot of one. Now I don't have this ego thing anymore where I have to finish a book even if I don't like it.
Sure. Yeah.
If I
It
just
can
don't
be
have
hard
time.
to get past that, though.
Yeah, it took
But,
me
yeah, you have
years.
to
Now I'll just
Just
put them
be
away.
like, oh, this is bad.
That's not
Okay.
good. I'm gonna change the channel on that. But anyway,
Dude, I totally give books. That's one area I've never struggled. I'm like, yeah,
I've
here
always
you go.
struggled with
I'm
it.
gonna give this. I'm like, yeah, this is a great book. Why don't you read this shit? Just hand it to somebody randomly on the street.
Are you going to continue kind of the arc with the same series, or do you have plans for something else?
I have 3 more books planned for this series.
Okay.
There's a bunch of other things that I want to do, but I want to finish this first.
Cool.
So I have a promise to my readers.
Yeah.
And I've always planned it to be 6 books. There is like an overarching story there, but I also need that to make my money back. There is, unfortunately, money decisions that you have to make as an author. And that's one of them.
But actually, you just brought up something that's pretty cool that I don't think a lot of people think about. I've been talking to a lot of creative folks. Our last guy on here, Wayne, he's a really high level video game artist. He's worked on every famous game you've ever played, probably.
Totally.
You know, but there's a level of accountability when you get a fan base.
Yeah.
And so it is. Oh, he wants to sit by you now. It is figuring out that balance between doing it for yourself and continuing to be creative and having it feed you, but also answering to the requirements or the asks of the fan base too.
Yeah. Because no spoiler, this is a business.
Yeah.
And to put out the kind of content that I want and the creativity that I want and to reach the masses that I need to make money.
Yeah.
But when I draft a book, it is always art first.
Yeah.
I don't think about marketing until I'm done with the book. But you do have to be accountable to your audience. You, a creative, you make a promise to them to entertain and to alleviate their day-to-day lives. And if they look to you for that,
you can't phone that shit in.
no, you can't.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. You know, and the other thing that I've learned through this process of the podcast, and especially interviewing more creative folks, is that one of the hugest differentiators between truly creative and maybe somebody who's just savvy and they're a craftsman or whatever is, what are they doing when somebody's not looking, right? And my sense for you is you're still fucking writing.
Yeah.
You're still just, you're putting.
Oh, if I don't make my money back, I'm gonna be writing anyways.
Yeah.
I'm always going to be writing or doing something creative.
Right.
It's an itch I have to scratch, or else I get existential terror and freak out. And
What am I offering to this world? What am I doing with my time? All these things.
exactly. And
I'm going to call you next time I'm going through it, which may be sooner than you think.
I wrote a serial called Existential Terror and Breakfast,
Yep.
which was sort of an anti-novel, but it was every moment of someone's life where they were like, oh, holy shit, I'm gonna die, what am I doing? But one of my favorite philosophers, Susan Wolf, and this is a quote that I return to all of the time about having existential terror, is that the key to life is having active engagement in projects of worth. And so, you know, to reach eudaimonia, which is a form of happiness through doing Aristotelian virtue, you have to pick up projects that distract you from the day-to-day,
Right.
that are worth doing. You're likely not going to be happy while you're doing all of this, but you're going to be distracted. But when you're done, that is a form of happiness that you can't get anywhere else.
No.
Like hearing a song that you just produced or holding the book that you just wrote
Yeah.
justifies your life and what you've been doing. And so to fight back that existential terror, I involve myself in creativity because I know that the payoff is good,
Yeah.
even for that moment. And the distraction works as a good panacea in the meantime.
Yeah.
Well, and maybe you feel the same way. Well, especially because you had those two readers that came to mind. Just those two make it worth it all, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Like
Yeah.
even if you lost
Yeah.
your ass money wise and you were still struggling, you'd be like, I still put this out, and this had that
And
effect.
it affected somebody's life. Somebody connected to my fever dream.
Yeah, and the crazy part is, like, the majority of my listeners for a long time were in Afghanistan when back in the late 2000s, like when I was first putting out music, I found out that I had this huge following in the military, who listened to my music and
wouldn't have the money or the access to be buying up the kind of albums
yeah.
otherwise, you know.
And they were just streaming I was like, holy crap. So
Yeah.
there's people around the world that are streaming this stuff, and I can't even, like, you can't even get, after so long, you can't even get your friends to listen to it.
A lot of my audience on my mailing list tends to be older because they don't have the income to buy paperbacks anymore. Because
And they actually
digital-
like reading.
yeah, and they fucking love reading.
Yeah.
And so through these connections, you learn about the people that your artwork affects. And it's not always the people that you expect,
Yeah.
but that's okay. My readership also, like, so post-apocalyptic fiction or people who read a lot of it, like, that's their jam. That is the only genre they read. They tend to be very, very... what is the word I'm looking for? They really like Ayn Rand, like, and that's just not a thing that I can gel with. But my books are about paying taxes, and I've noticed that, like, I get reviews of people who are like, "Yeah, I kind of want to pay my taxes now."
That's hilarious.
Which you would not get from that sort of mindset, it's that genre tends to be very libertarian, which I'm not, and it's absolutely funny to me that I've subverted that and have put my own messages about society out there that may change minds.
Yeah.
May not too, though. Their cognitive dissonance is a hell of a thing.
It really is.
Just by you putting your thoughts and philosophies, and actually maybe it's even precursor to that, maybe it's almost like just by you going through the process of sort of sharing your thoughts and philosophies about society and about politics and all these things that, I'm assuming you touch on in your books. Are you finding that you've evolved since like book one?
I have, yeah. My thoughts on a lot of things about society have changed a little bit, and my initial goals have changed as well. Also because I've been talking to my readers and I've learned what's really important to myself.
Yeah.
I wasn't aware of how much representation in media matters to me. I grew up on Star Trek, so
Yep.
you had Uhura, you had Sulu, and all of these firsts in television and representation that people didn't have at that time.
Sure.
And without thinking about it, I wrote a black bisexual character because my partner at the time didn't have that kind of representation growing up. She had nothing in comic books or movies that she could point to and be like, that character looks and acts like me.
Yeah.
And it's a powerful form of empathy to give that representation. And it also forces someone who may not have that in their life, may have a very homogenistic society around them, that don't come into contact with people that don't look like them. Well, now here is a positive outlet that can plant the seed to show them that people are just people. So I've learned the more that I write that spreading empathy through diversity matters a lot to me.
Have you found? So I have some friends. I have friends all over the spectrum, like from intelligence and accomplishments and age and you name it, right? Like
Sure.
it spans. I'm a social guy, a bit of an introvert too, but have you found that? This is what I'm hearing. Have you found that the woke themes or the social justice warrior themes in comic books and novels and TV shows and movies, is it becoming too sort of mainstream, too predictable, or do you think it's something that still deserves a spotlight on it? And
I think a lot of it is phoned in.
Okay.
Because the people writing it are white, cisgendered, straight males like myself.
Right.
So because of that, I think they're also doing it for marketing reasons,
Sure.
where they can point to.
There's like an authenticity loss.
They can virtue signal and be like,
Yep.
no, look, but our company, like,
Yeah.
Yep,
we
yep.
have the pride flags out on June and then no other time of the year. So I think a lot of it is phoned in, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
But I still think that overall it does good. And I think it is still really necessary. I think that audiences just aren't used to seeing people who are not white or straight. And most of our media is that. So when something different comes around, it gets a lot of attention.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's unnecessary backlash there. But yeah, the woke community also does a lot of patting on their back.
Yeah.
Where it's just like, all right, racism solved. We did it. We made a character black. We can all go home. And that's just a part of the fight. But I think that if you don't represent different people in media, you don't give power to those voices.
Right.
And so if we want to see it done right, we need to empower creatives who look differently from us. We need to get the keyboard into the hands of someone who is black and gay and have them create work because it would come from a more honest place.
Right.
And it is just an underserved group of people to begin with.
Yeah, I found myself in this. I was asking this mostly just to check myself a little bit, because anecdotally, I found myself giving up on certain sci-fi books, giving up on certain series, certain movies, just where it just felt disingenuous.
Because it is disingenuous a lot of the times. Yeah.
It's like, this is a great storyline. And what is happening? It just doesn't feel right. It's not something I want to continue with and invest in.
If the driving trait of the character is that they are a minority, or that they are gay or something, that is usually a disservice.
Right.
Because they should be a character first. And so that's just poor writing, and also not really knowing what those humans look like, or how they act, which is just like humans. But I totally get that. I
just didn't know if it was me, like my own bias that's getting more magnified because all that's going on in the world, or if I'm just getting older, or if the content is actually getting worse.
You are an older generation than I am.
I am. I'm an Xer, yeah.
Like, Generation X, at least in my experience, does tend to push back a little bit on change.
True.
And a lot of the representation we see is also lazy because they're just flipping pre-existing characters.
Yep.
Instead of creating something new and something interesting. But yeah, I don't know.
No, I appreciate you at least entertaining my thoughts on this stuff, because dude, I love to read. I always have, and books of all kinds, but I definitely have a soft spot for a good sci-fi or a good dystopian story, or even some good fantasy,
Sure, and you know what? The ones that are doing it well are like, you learn that the captain is gay midway through because it's a detail that doesn't matter.
Right.
Yeah.
Instead of heralding the moment you meet him.
I think that's where my filter breaks sometimes, when it's too up front, like almost feels unnecessary to know.
And that's because they're trying to parade it instead of treating them human. And so, but I think that it still needs credit.
Yep.
Because that is an underserved minority.
Yeah.
That doesn't have representation. Yeah. Like, you look at movies in the 80s, can get really fucking cringy with how they portrayed, like, Asians or
for sure.
Indians. Long Duck Dong comes to mind.
I was just thinking 16 Candles, seriously.
It's so fucking blatantly bad.
Falling out of the tree, no more Yankee, my wanky.
Yeah.
Still a great movie, but like, even that shit, I was just like, oh my God.
And so I think we're seeing a form of that to a lesser degree, where people, like in the 80s, they'd be like, yeah, but there was an Asian character and he was on the screen. Now it would just be like, I'm still trying to like change when I don't know what the fuck I'm doing because I eat Wheaties and take tennis seriously because I'm white.
Well, man, all this is just so interesting to me, just because, especially like, for me, I don't have TV. I don't watch movies.
Sure.
I don't watch shows. I read what people share with me, or like I really do my best more and more. I'm trying to stay off social. I hate media in general, more and more as things go on, and and that's a big part of why it made it easy for me to stop putting out music. And like, so I still have a piano. I just got a drum set, and I play music constantly. I don't share it with the world anymore the way I used to, and I don't know if I really ever will again the way I used to. But it's just so interesting to think, especially with like all this stuff that's come about Hollywood right now, and man, like the system for media, although there is, I think there needs to be an outlet for people to be able to continue to produce, but it is so, I love that you're doing it the way you're doing it. And it's, as you know, it's the way I've always done it. I'm like,
Yeah.
And when we used to live together, he'd be upstairs writing and I would be creating music. Like all we would do is when we were on our own, we were create, and then we drink Carlo Rossi and then have a great time. And smoke hookah. But
Yeah, pretty much.
but and that I love thinking of that, and I can't wait to actually read the rest of his. But just thinking about media in general, and it's so true just how broken it is. And I haven't felt at home living in an area in Seattle until I just recently moved to Hilltop and Tacoma, and
Oh, that's not surprising to me. Yeah.
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 and I like there is such an eclectic group even on my block.
Well, like you think that the people that produced movies and music for a long time were doing so for a white audience.
Yeah.
And people live longer, generations are not dying off, and these older systems are still in place.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the television, the music, and everything that we get is still for a homogenized group.
Yeah.
And Phil, although you might like have a knee-jerk reaction against some of this, think about the young black girl that didn't have a black superhero before.
Totally.
Now, you know?
For sure. And that's where I'm continually like trying to look in the mirror and reflect on my biases, you know.
I bring up Star Trek a bunch, but you know, Whoopi Goldberg credits seeing Nichelle Nichols as Uhura on television as her inspiration to act and do comedy, because it was the first time she had seen a black woman on TV who was not a maid. She was an astronaut.
Yeah.
You know, now we can look back at it and be like, okay, well, she was really just answering the phone on this starship.
Right.
And it's still pretty fucking sexist.
Right.
But for the 60s, that was a big deal.
Yeah.
And so
It at least moved the bar.
people are doing it clumsily, and we should hold people to higher standards, but they're trying.
But it's good. And this is why I'm asking, because I have a tendency to initially feel very open-minded, but then I'll also just like shut the door if the shit annoys me too much.
And that's a natural part of being human. Challenging, especially if you think that you are open-minded.
Right. But then I start to realize I'm not totally. That's why I'm just like, you know,
And
this is a good conversation for me. And you're challenging me a little bit, because it's making me, as we're having this discussion, it's making me go back and think like, why does this, you know, whatever content I'm picking up, why does it hit me in a way that sort of irritates me?
sure.
Yeah.
And it is funny how quick I'm the same way. Like how quickly, when I feel like something is just for the attention or for the like you were saying, like the social justice warrior, like as a recent experience that I had that I told you about that I'll have to fill Fitz in on later. But it led me to quit a job I had over this, and people who do things for the fame, like for the attention of, oh, I'm woke. Oh, I'm, you know, I am doing this because, and see, look, I fit. It's like, it's a different sort of Me Too, right? But I feel like I can sniff that out 100 miles away, and I will just shut, even though they're trying. I'll be like, you are trying, but you're not. And it's not coming from a pure, and I'm probably an asshole for being like this, but I'm like, even though you're trying, it's solely for your personal gain. It's not genuine enough, and then so for me, I'll just be like, no, fuck off. You're a piece of shit. And that's probably part of it.
But I think this is the struggle, right? Because even if it does feel disingenuous to Ben or myself, like you said, Fitz, maybe that black 12-year-old girl who's questioning her sexuality, even if it's maybe even a virtue signaling character or post or it still helps her. It's
still important. I mean, like, hey, the three of us, for shits and giggles, let's go to Comic-Con next year.
Dude, I'm in. I've never been.
And let's all cosplay as X-Men. So okay, what X-Men do you want to be?
Well, who gets to be Xavier? We're all bald.
Yeah, right?
And I like to sit down. I'll be Xavier because I can be in a wheelchair all day. I can sit down. I can be bald. I don't have
Right. You can choose Wolverine. You can choose Cyclops. You can choose Xavier.
Yeah.
My former partner can choose Storm, and that's it. That's the only
Yeah.
thing that she can go as and not get backlash from some racist who is just like, that character is supposed to be white.
Yeah.
Ben, of course, chose a blue character
Of course he did.
Well, it's like,
to undermine my point.
To completely your very eloquent, organized point that just got completely off the cliff because of Ben totally Thelma and Louise your point.
so I don't even know what Thelma and Louise is. Maybe this helps
At the very
my
end,
point.
they hold hands and they just drive off the fucking cliff.
But we also get like a lot of backlash, especially in like comic books, where they're like, "Oh, you can't make that character look like that, though." And like,
Yeah.
are you really willing? Is this the hill you want to die on? The ridiculous robot character that flies?
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
Well, that's why Bane is my favorite character in Batman because
he's
when
the only Latino.
he was the only Latino, and so when I was a
didn't know
kid, he
Bane
was
Latino.
he was a luchador when we were. I remember seeing his
okay.
luchador.
the mask. Yeah.
Yep.
Got
and
it.
I was like, dude, this dude's ripped. He's a huge badass. He's a Mexican wrestler, and he fucks up Batman every now and then. I'm like, I like this guy.
Which is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And it is and it totally paints the picture of King's Beach, right? So Batman,
The rich white dude, yeah.
white dude who's
Has
out to-
everything.
out to save the world, and this Latino luchador just beats his ass every now and then. Like, yeah.
So I think that
Hell yeah.
also
So that kind of supports your point.
these generations and audiences are very used to audiences are used to media being for them.
Yes.
Every movie that you walk into, it's gonna look like you, and we're now in a place where that's starting to be different.
Yeah.
And that's rattled white people, which is hilarious because you still have 12 other movies with a white protagonist.
Yep.
So what if there's 3 with a Latino or someone who's gay or whatever? We're just used to everything being for us.
Right.
And sometimes not every story is for you,
Yeah.
and nor should it be. Stories are there to help people grow, to create identity. And if it doesn't resonate for you, it's likely not for you.
And it's so funny how this has opened my eyes to now thinking back on all the media, all the movies I did like when I used to watch. Like, there's not a whole lot where it was primarily white.
No,
Or I'm
and
like-
the ones that weren't, the role models weren't exactly positive.
Yeah,
No.
Like you mentioned Bane, like love Bane, but he's the bad guy.
yeah,
And so if you build your identity on these heroes that you're given, you're going to fall into the tropes and fallacies around those heroes.
and then not only that, I mean, but that totally supports the society that they have, right? And so going in depth into all of that, it's just so eye-opening. Like, blood in, blood out. Like, American Me. Like, these are awful people.
Yeah.
These are awful humans, and those are Latino films, right? And it's funny because
Hell, Scarface is
Scarface?
still adored, and
Yeah.
he's not the good guy.
He's not the
But
good guy.
I mean, you could choose Scarface or nothing.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's funny because a big part of, and it wasn't as I was a child, but a big thing I've struggled with over the last several years is, and it doesn't come from the Latino community, it comes from the white community more so, is I feel like Miklo, because people keep forcing this, you're white, like,
You're this. Yeah.
you are white because I am so fair skinned. And I mean, I'm actually dark for one of the first times in Nevada or in Washington because I've been in the sun. I'm back working in the sun, so I'm getting dark again, like how more dark how it used to be. But I noticed that, especially over the last year, and as this has risen, I've had more white people tell me, like, expecting me to identify with them because they're like, no, you're white. Everybody knows you're white. And I had a buddy tell me, he's like, everybody thinks you're white. And I was like, no, every white person in Issaquah where I was coaching thinks I'm white.
Yeah.
Because
any ethnic person looks at you and they're like, you're ethnic, and also you're not ethnic enough.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so I literally feel like how Miklo was always, or like, the way I explain it is like, for white rappers, they all think they need to be Eminem and they need to go harder than everybody else. But there have been times where I've truthfully felt like, do I have people? And the more, like, I haven't seen Fitz in a year, and so now I finally moved to the Hilltop, and I'm starting to feel at home.
Yeah.
And like, I hang out with my black neighbors and my weird warlock neighbor all the time, and I only call him weird because
I think it's okay to call a warlock weird.
because
That's
he's
okay.
a warlock.
Yeah, it's fine.
But
Yeah, the witch community is underserved, but I mean, it's
but
fine.
he is but he'll never replace my Fitz. I'm like,
Yeah.
you're not the bald blue-eyed guy I need in my life. Get out of here. No, but yeah, I don't know, man.
Do you
This is
guys
just-
mind if I rant a little bit about storytelling?
Rant a little bit, and I was gonna say, do you want another beer?
Yeah, I'll
go
take
grab you
another
another beer.
Sure.
Do you need anything, Ben? Because I
what
think
you
he
got?
might want to come up and get some dinner. So I want you to start your rant. I'm gonna take him upstairs
Cool.
because I can tell he's getting antsy, which means
And if you think you have anything else for me, feel
you
free.
want. I'm trying to think what I got. You want some alcoholic?
no alcohol for me, please.
Okay.
So,
If
story
not, it's all good.
I don't know if I got any.
storytelling is the form of art that I've chosen because I think that it's the most powerful.
It is.
Because we are evolved to tell stories and to be around stories. There are the stories that we tell each other. There are the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves. Language is built around storytelling. We're evolved for it.
Yeah.
If we weren't doing this podcast right now, if society shut down, we'd still be doing something like this around a campfire.
Yes.
We'd be reminiscing, repeating stories that we've told each other, that we've told ourselves. And I don't think people are as cognitive about how stories have structured their lives.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you were saying earlier you didn't really have heroes.
Yeah.
Well, how are you supposed to feel heroic in your life without that? If you grow up and every story tells you that you're the villain, you believe it, even if you don't. Even
Yeah.
if you're like, no, that's silly. In your core, this is what society tells you. And storytelling creates society. You know, if you don't think that stories are not important or that stories don't change the world, there's a story about a Jew who preached too much and then died, and now we have everything in our society because of it.
Yeah. And people who try to make him white.
Yeah. Try to make a brown guy white.
There's no freaking way you grow up in the Middle
In the
East
fucking Middle East. Yeah.
and you're white.
And so, like, every character has tropes that we may not be aware of. You mentioned Batman.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I fucking love Batman. I adore Batman. I can rant about this asshole forever. Like, yes, he's my shit. But at the end of the day, Batman is a rich white libertarian who takes the law into his own hands.
Yeah.
And so we are taught to adore rich people who don't obey the law. And now we have one like that in office.
Well, and not only that,
When Batman could have been spending the money he had on the Batmobile instead of putting that into schools
yeah,
or prison reform or other ways to fight crime that weren't dressed as a bat. Thank you for the beer.
You're welcome. I didn't have anything exciting else for you, Ben.
It's all good. Well, and oh man, and one of the interesting things about what's going on is both sides. Both sides. I'm like, that is why I posted the other day. I was like, Kanye 2020, because both sides, like, okay, all the connection with Epstein and literally, I hope everybody on any flight logs or even any, I hope they get, I don't care how if you knew anything about this man and you didn't help, well, I mean,
which, like we were talking about Hollywood earlier, like that whole industry was set up to hide things like that.
For sure.
And so we need to tear that shit down. And if we believe the stories that are structured to keep those sort of things in power, we have no reason to want to change it.
Yeah.
And so, like, I know that I can't change. I've been an activist of some form my whole life.
Yeah.
And protesting is largely a cathartic thing that the community does because they're angry. And it can change things, but you need other pillars to support that. So through experience, I know that I can't personally change a lot, but what I can do is tell stories that people can identify with and then internalize, and that maybe through time change minds.
Yeah.
And that's why I think storytelling is so powerful, and that there are I keep mentioning tropes. Sorry, a trope is basically a cliche that we all know about through storytelling that we don't really think about,
right?
But it's more of a tool.
Right. And I mean, look at what, and just going into like you said, Scarface was the guy, right? Look at what is glorified. Like, in even my own music, I was living that life. Like, I was doing all that shit, and look at what the stuff is glorified in. Like, all the people of color, all the minorities who are making so much money, like they grew up being the anti-hero.
Yeah.
And they followed that model, myself included, and it was very difficult for me to break.
Those were the only heroes.
Yeah.
And you know that. I also mentioned the stories we tell ourselves about our own lives.
Yeah,
for sure.
Like how me and you never thought I'd live past 30.
Right. in our heads, we are all the protagonist of our story. Yeah. We are, whether you mean to or not, you think you are the main character. And because storytelling is based off of like a 3-act structure, we think of things like that. Yeah. We're like, oh, this is my time for change. Like, and now I'm going to build myself back up and I'm going to get the reward that I deserve. But life doesn't work that way. You don't always get the reward, no matter how hard that you work. And if we are cognizant of that we build ourselves up in our heads as the hero, then we can take a step back and be like, well, what is reality actually doing? Am I actually being the good person that I think I'm being? Mm-hmm. Or am I actually the antagonist?
Well, and
if I'm the antagonist, what do I need to do to become the hero?
Well, and kind of to that point, I felt in my own life, I truthfully felt like the antagonist through most of my 20s. And I kind of...
And you acted like it.
I owned it because I was like, this is who I am. And then it got to a point where I was like, I can't take being this anymore, so I will not continue to do this. But, man, it's wild to think about. And it's one of the reasons why... So... I've disconnected myself from our core group of friends because there is a misunderstanding with my brother that me and my brother have since cleared up. That created even more of a rift between me and some of our core friends that since I didn't hear back from people, I started. It's why you didn't even know I had a podcast. And this is exactly about what you're talking about. Our whole purpose for this is telling people stories and helping people to understand where they're at and where they want to go and helping us just to learn about them.
Totally.
And so this is something where I'm like, oh man, now that we're doing this, like Fitz would love this.
Yeah.
And you would love this whole structure.
Stories were not traditionally as set in stone as they are today.
Yeah.
We had an oral tradition for a very long time where the same story could be told. Like, I have a story I want to tell and lessons for both of you. I'm going to tell it to Ben differently than I did to you so that he takes away
The same lesson.
the same lesson or something different because he's grown up differently.
Right. Or he's just not nearly as mature and
Yeah,
Definitely not that.
But like the core, the story could change, and that was not viewed as a bad thing.
right.
Written work has really changed that. That's why you hear like what is canon, what isn't canon, because it's written down forever. And what excites me about things like the internet is we're moving on from a written society into more of a visual society. So it's evolved even past an oral tradition, and I'm excited to see how that changes things.
Yeah.
You know, people take old stories and mutate them and change them into something completely different and weird. And most of the time it's really bad, but sometimes
Yeah.
it can resonate.
Definitely.
Let me ask you this, this might be a question you don't have an answer to, but out of all the works that you've done, out of all the, and we'll just keep it to writing for right now, out of all the content that you've written, is there one particular piece that like you're most proud of that you sort of hold up as the bar that you try to meet or exceed?
Yeah. A Happy Bureaucracy.
Okay.
The first book in my series is not the first thing that I was really proud of, but the first thing that I wasn't embarrassed about.
Sure.
In like any sort of capacity, and one that I had worked extremely hard towards, and at the time was the culmination of my humor, my beliefs, and everything that I had learned at that point.
And it was expressed in a way where you felt like it was genuine and it flowed and it made sense and it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now I look at it and like I can do better. But that's being an artist is always looking at your previous work and cringing.
So I bet you say that now you look at it and you can do better. But even with DJ mixes that I've made, and I was listening to one with my wife in the radio who doesn't understand what the hell I'm doing when I'm mixing 3 songs together, whatever. And I always say that I can do better. But then there's moments that I hear in a DJ mix, just like I bet you hear in your writing, just like I bet you hear in your lyrics, where you're like, holy shit, I don't know where the fuck that came from. That was I don't think I'd do that today. Like that was really surprising.
As the artist, you were always so like neck deep in the technicalities of everything that you're like, that was technically poor. Well, the audience doesn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
they can look at it more objectively and be like, no, that's still good.
Well, that's just like how I can relate to that because my last album by far was my best, but I was trying to recreate what I did with Rogue.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Rogue was a story from start to finish. It had like 23 songs on it.
Yeah.
And
But like why rap is so powerful is because it's storytelling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why it resonated so hard. I mean, music is also storytelling. Even something instrumental can just be an emotional journey, but
anytime I'm on the piano.
Yeah, I think that the piano is a place you're supposed to die at. Yeah. I think. But yeah, A Happy Bureaucracy. I've no matter what I've created, I've never took it 100% seriously.
Yeah,
I always have a mocking tone to a degree because that's how I look at life. Like life is too weird and absurd not to laugh at, even at its darkest moments. So I'm happy that the humor broke through on there, but that I also said the existential things that I wanted.
Yeah.
And, you know, I wrote it. My mother was a victim of sexual abuse. A lot of people in my life, including myself, are a victim. And I wrote it at the start of the Me Too movement when people were finally paying attention to it.
Yeah.
However, whatever you think of that moment, it was important that people finally listened to victims.
Yeah.
I think
so,
importance, like the most key word in that. It was important, regardless if you agree, disagree, didn't follow along the whole way. Like, it was important for that shit to come out.
Yeah, growing up,
People need voices.
Yep.
If I were to tell my story of abuse, it would be doubted.
For sure.
And it's embarrassing. It
Feels
feels shameful.
It is. But it's not your fault, and it shouldn't be shameful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And so I had toxic masculinity on my mind a lot when I wrote this. That's why the character he's a fucking tax man. There is no ounce of badass in the main character. There just fucking isn't. It might be in Arabia, the second secondary character, but like he's just good at math, and that's his personality.
Yeah.
Start and end of it. And he's in a hyper masculine world because that's the post-apocalypse, right? Where we burn children to keep warm, and we eat horses, but only the buff ones, you know?
Yeah. Is there lots of like leather wearing and exposed
fuck
weapon?
yeah. Fuck yeah. Like every ridiculous trope you could think of.
Perfect. That's how I always wanted. I just want to wear a leather outfit.
Hubcaps for hats.
Nice.
Like all of these things, and in the middle of it is a guy that just...
He still irons his shirt every day.
Yeah, his shirt is
tie.
clean. Like, it doesn't make any sense.
He comes with his glasses, and he's like...
Like, there's a sex scene, and he can't get it up. Like, he just... at every turn, he is not what the world would consider a man, but he is also the most heroic and compassionate person in that book. Because the definition of a man is stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it has affected my friends and myself in really fucking bad ways.
Yeah.
You know, like masculinity is, in society, it is a hard thing to build up, but it is an easy thing to take away from another.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's stupid, and it affects us, and it shouldn't. And because it does, it affects the women that we love around us. Yeah. So yeah, to answer your question.
So
No, I fucking love the answer. That's why I was...
Phil and I talk about masculinity a lot. And because
the two tattooed guys with no hair? No. What?
And so a big part of it is, and something that we talked about, actually, when I was talking to Jess this weekend, apparently she listens to the podcast, and she was like, I thought it was so funny when you and Phil were talking about how you felt pressured before to, like, when you're turning down women because you've made this standpoint of that's not who you are anymore. And she was like, now you know how every woman feels every second of their life. But
yeah, do we need to give you more context on that, or does that make sense?
No, I get it. I totally get all of that. Yeah.
And so there's been a big part of the less I've seen our old friend group and the more I've been with Phil, there have been a lot of big transformations that
you don't think they've seen.
Yeah. And
for sure,
a big part of this is with how raw and I've become with myself, and I've shared with Phil more than anybody else, and how just accountable on every level, and how vulnerable that I've become with Phil. And we talk about how, I think there was just this time when I talked about how special a moment I had when I went to this beach, and we just started laughing just because, like, the way I said it, and it was like, man, if anybody saw us from the outside looking in, and then they heard you say that one sentence out of all of this, they would have been like, wait, what just happened?
Did either of you guys watch Letterkenny?
Yes.
I haven't.
The joke where they're like, what's the softest thing you've ever said?
Right.
And they get super embarrassed. And Dan is just like, I'm worried about my perennials. And it's hilarious because he's this masculine
Totally
farmhand or whatever, but like, fuck it, we're human. Like,
Yeah.
you planted the perennials. You're going to be worried about your fucking perennials, man. And so, I don't, like,
Perennials suck.
real quick, I also, like, wear a kilt to subvert expectations on what is masculine.
Yeah.
It's like, I am a man because I do good in the world.
Yeah.
Not because I'm angry raw.
Yeah.
Well, and because you stand behind, no matter the outcome, Fitz stands behind his morals and his values.
Yeah.
And so that is more manly to me than because it doesn't matter how hard somebody could hit somebody or how fast somebody could run. If at the end of the day, they're going to say, oh, well, I'm just going to agree with you because because you're like I'm going to conform to what you want.
Fuck that. Like, I'm sorry. If you don't like me or what I say, that's a quick filter to get you out of my world.
Yeah.
I do my best to admit when I'm wrong and I try to change, and that can be hard.
That's growth, man.
Fuck, change is the hardest.
Oh, and it fucking should be too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the outcome wouldn't be worth it if it were easy.
Yeah.
And the moment that you're complacent is when you need to challenge yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. I mean, I look at Ben, and Ben becoming more empathetic, becoming way, way more self-aware than I've ever seen Ben, like, in this transformation. We're talking year, 2 years. Like, really every time I hook up with Ben and get to spend a little bit of concentrated time with him, it's fun to watch this continued progression. But Ben has also become way more masculine, even though he's not gangbanging and dealing drugs. And it's just
because these things were always there.
Yeah.
Ben has always been an incredibly sensitive and empathetic person who will also whoop your ass.
Right. And I think that is almost becoming, that's how we need to redefine masculinity.
So, like, I don't know, Ben, when you say, like, I've grown, I'm just like, you're just being who you've been afraid to be. Like, I've always seen these things in you. It's why I have stuck around.
He was just kicking him down a little bit. Right?
Yeah. But you believed the stories that you told to yourself.
And I think that's almost exactly.
And others.
And I think that's a very good. I think that's almost like that's the realization I had. Right. I think that's what I said in our first one was, I was like, who the fuck am I? Like, because I know who I am deep inside, and it's that guy you knew that we grew up with. Exactly what you're saying right now, and that realization was the hardest for me to. And I had to encounter some real heavy darkness in order to move past that. But I appreciate you saying that because that kind of affirms to me what I felt was true about myself.
Well, I think what we've seen with you is you've hit rock bottom maybe a few different times.
Oh, so many times.
And, right? But
the times.
But you've come out of it as just a reinvention of yourself, or not even a reinvention, just the more true version of yourself, less cluttered.
Did either of you guys ever play with rock tumblers as a kid?
Yeah.
Okay. That's this is gonna be the drug hippie side of me.
I think I know where it's going, but I want to hear.
That's how I have viewed life, is that you were put into a rock tumbler looking like shit, and with each turn you go through more and more traumatic shit. It gets harder and harder and harder, but it only polishes you more.
Yeah.
But you have to let life polish you. You have to take away the lessons it is trying to give you, and you may not recognize the lessons 9 times out of 10.
Yeah.
But that's okay.
So I just keep hitting rock bottom until
Yeah,
it's time.
it's fine. There's always going to be another turn.
Yeah.
No, but it is. It's that discomfort, and it is one of the things that really has driven the theme of this whole project is understanding how valuable discomfort it is, understanding how valuable it is to like truly, genuinely reflect.
Yeah.
Friction and smoke.
Yeah,
That's what it is.
Without that, you don't have creativity.
yeah,
It's such a cliche when people are like, no, all good creative things are born out of darkness. It's like, well, Weird Al is also a thing, so that's not fucking true.
right.
But
I wouldn't know that reference if it wasn't for Fitz.
But Living Saints aside, good art comes from experience and from a want to connect with others and to express things that you maybe could not just through talking to people.
Yeah,
You know, storytelling and language can only go so far. Sometimes emotions are ineffable, or we don't have the word for it yet, or your experience is so singular that you don't have the tropes or the characters to tell that story. And I think that's where all other art is born, is a desperation to express that darkness or those, you know, I love Van Gogh. And anyone who has watched Doctor Who knows where I'm going with this, but Van Gogh drew the most vibrant, beautiful paintings, and he did it when he was in a mental institution.
right.
He did it at his darkest hour, and he had all of this pain and doubt and addiction and sadness, and he could have expressed that, and instead he painted the most beautiful, happy things you will ever see. So I think all art comes from darkness, but I don't think that darkness has to be filtered into more darkness.
Yeah. And I actually think that's probably a good place to see, because I think that's probably a good place for us to see, because that's beautiful what you're saying.
Yeah, it came from
What's-
Doctor Who. It didn't come from me. It's fine. Yeah,
Well,
it's fine.
So with that, we kind of want to know what's your so we also like to go into legacy. So what do you see in the coming or what do you have coming up, and then what would you like to leave us with?
Yeah, if you leave this planet, like what's the Fitz legacy? And if you haven't thought about it or haven't figured it out, that's okay too. But
Oh God, I think about it all of the
I
time.
bet you do. I
It
bet
is
you do.
so fucking maddening, and it's driven because we are finite and we are going to die. We're going to die, and so what do you do about that? Coming next, I have the draft for my next book. I tend to write very quickly, not as fast as a lot of independent publishers who might do, a book a month. And I don't know how you don't get burnt out or you don't hire other people to write for you.
Right.
But traditionally speaking, I still write really fast. I pour out 2 to 3 books a year. So I have an upcoming one that I hope will be out in November. Don't quote me on that, though. I don't like to put deadlines out into the world because I want to make sure that it is the best product that I can possibly make. But the Happy Bureaucracy series is going to be continued into book 4, which is going to be a post-apocalyptic boot camp. If you want to have a little taste of that madness, this isn't going to spoil anything from the other books, but everyone in the boot camp is kept there from explosive chastity belts. So every slave soldier has a chastity belt and 2 grenades where their balls would be, and if they get out of line or they go outside of the perimeter, that explodes. So every book I write is more unhinged than the last. It's going to be a good time. It's going to be hilarious and thought-provoking at the same time, believe it or not.
I believe it.
But my legacy, I want a backlist of books to represent every decade of my life. I'm never going to stop writing, and a book will outlast a human being forever.
Yep.
We are still connecting with people who wrote books thousands of years ago. And we still celebrate characters that were written 1,000 years ago or even 100 years ago. You know, one of my favorite characters of all time is Sherlock Holmes. I love the work, all of the short stories there. I really connected with the character, and he is still being reinvented and retold for a modern time. Like,
sure.
House was a retelling of Sherlock Holmes, just in a medical light. Then you have like a literal modern interpretation like Sherlock or whatever, but you see this character molded for whatever time he's in, but the original work still stands out. People will still go back to that and connect with that. It's still as strong as it ever was. So I hope that I leave stories behind that outlive me, that people tell, that people learn from, laugh from, and find better ways to fucking tell them. You know, I'm a big advocate for creatives holding on to their copyright, but I'm sorry, once you're dead, that belongs to everybody. And I would be excited to see what somebody would take from my written work and how that might change. No, I think what Disney does with holding back the public domain is abhorrent because it keeps culture from moving on. But Disney is never going to buy my shit. So
Yeah.
it'll be in the hands of whoever is alive after I'm dead. And I think that's cool. And even though I may be far gone, the stories that I wanted to tell can still affect people.
Awesome.
And in 100 years from now, they'll be like, yeah, you know, I really liked the book that MP Fitzgerald wrote, but he was really like anti-robot, and that really wasn't cool. Like, that fucking bigot just hated robots. And can we talk about that? Can we talk about that?
Awesome.
That is awesome. Anything else? I mean, I think we almost did 3 hours. And I feel like we just scratched the surface. So you'll definitely be coming back. Maybe when your new book releases, you'll come back.
Yeah, I'd
that'll
love
at least
to.
be the long tail timeline.
I mean, please cut as much as you
We
can.
don't We
don't cut.
Oh, God, that's such a mistake. No one is going to listen to this, guys.
Oh, and from the artist's point of view, I've never copywritten anything. Never once. Because that's how much I care about art.
Well, by simply putting it out there,
Technically,
it's
it's
copywritten.
copywritten.
But I hear you.
I've never taken the legal steps to write out the lyrics because I don't believe in it.
Look.
I think it's important for
if somebody steals my book, you read it, cool, good.
Exactly.
You weren't like, I was poor, I pirated shit. I understand.
Yeah.
You may not be in the best place, or you're lazy.
And that's why I buy your books.
But I'm glad that it affected you, or that you needed it in the moment. But I would say that if minimum wage in Seattle is what, $15 right
Yep.
now? Okay. If it takes you longer than 5 minutes to find my work and to steal it, it's more worth your time to just pay me than it is to go through that. So really, like, just buy my book. It's fine.
And I wasn't.
But you're never gonna stop pirating, though.
No. Yeah.
That, like, people steal. That's not a customer you lost. That's not money that you lost. That person was always going to fucking steal it.
And that may be a fan you gain.
And that may be a fan you gain in the long term.
And like you say, the importance of telling a story. That's somebody else who's going to tell your story, and maybe they share it with somebody who knows.
I certainly,
you know
like,
what I mean?
yeah, I certainly pirated shit in the past, and now I just give my money to the artist because I'm like, you deeply affected me, and I want you to have this.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah,
but that's pirates. I think that's a good place to leave it off.
I think it is. But you want to cue up that that outro?
Well, I want to say thanks for taking the time to do this, Fitz.
Yeah, totally.
It's I'm glad that
dude, thanks for coming in.
we were able to reconnect.
If anybody wants a free book,
my
website.
revfits.com.
Yeah, revfits.com.
Do you have an Instagram?
I do not. I am not on social media. I find it abhorrent.
Okay.
Kind of hurting me though.
Yeah.
So go to my website,
revfits.com, and the name of the book series,
Happy Bureaucracy.
Happy Bureaucracy.
All right.
All right.